On September 16, 2015, Barack Obama tweeted, "Cool clock, Ahmed. Want to bring it to the White House? We should inspire more kids like you to like science. It's what makes America great." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Unlike our 45th/47th president, Barack Obama was not really known for being a prolific and newsworthy poster. And so this might be his only tweet that will ever be covered in the Museum of Twitter. But it is one that is referenced a lot, and was definitely referenced a lot around the time. But if you don't remember the whole Ahmed clock incident, let's rewind so I can give you the context. In 2015, a 14-year-old high school freshman named Ahmed, who was living in Irving, Texas, made national news when he brought a disassembled clock to school, and school officials treated him as if he brought a bomb. Like, he was handcuffed and everything. And even when it was determined it wasn't a bomb, he was still suspended for 3 days. And this became a big national news story because obviously he was racially profiled. Like, I can even understand being a little bit suspicious if you see someone come into a school with a briefcase with some weird looking electronics. But once you determine it's not a bomb, and it is a clock like he says it is, what could the possible justification be for still suspending him for 3 days? And also, a point that a lot of people made at the time, which I think is really cogent, is that if they actually thought there was actual danger from a bomb, they would have evacuated the school. And they didn't do that. And so yeah, there was a lot of understandable outrage on behalf of Ahmed. And so amidst that outrage, President Obama sent out this tweet. And it did come to fruition. Ahmed did go to the White House for a science and technology event and did meet the president. And if you've never been on Twitter, you might be like, that's it? Why is this tweet famous? And I think it has much more to do with the phrasing of the tweet than it does the actual content of what it's about. Yes, if you go to the quote tweets of this tweet, you'll see a lot of people in 2017 and 18 quote tweeting it saying, "Oh, I miss when we had a president who tweeted like this." But that's not really the reason it's a meme. It's a meme because there's something just so funny about the phrasing of "cool clock, Ahmed, you should bring it to the White House." Like some form of "cool clock, Ahmed" or "cool clock name, you should bring it to the X" is a pretty common meme format. At least it very much was in 2015 and 2016. But it still is in 2024, like when basketball player who's afraid to shoot Ben Simmons brought a briefcase with a clock on the outside of it to the Met Gala. Fans since '09 tweeted, "Cool clock, Ben Simmons, want to bring it to the White House?" Obviously it's referenced whenever there's some type of unconventional clock, like this one with a liquid face powered by magnetism, or even more in jest, like when Nathan here has a screenshot from Oppenheimer and says, "Cool clock, J. Robert, want to bring it to the White House, ... Many people in 2017, when a man was charged with bringing a fake bomb onto an airplane that turned out to just be an alarm clock, quoted it with saying, "Cool clock, Ahmed." And people obviously reference it whenever there's anything that looks sort of electronic and suspicious, like when Justin Wang said, "Cool clock, Ahmed," to this photo of a briefcase with some wires in it. But I think its real niche on Twitter is when it's brought up in contexts that make no sense at all, like when the legend John Boyce tweeted, "Texas has fired Tom Herman after he brought a suspicious-looking clock he built to show all the teachers at school. He's being replaced by Steve Sarkisian, who has drawn major attention with a cool clock he built to show all the teachers at school." Like, what does that have to do with anything? I don't know, but like, that's what Twitter's about. And look, I don't normally go out of my way to show the jokes that I've made referencing certain tweets, but I think this one's actually pretty funny. I tweeted in 2018, "Pretty fucked up that the Avengers were trying to kill Thanos when all he did was bring a clock he built to school." I can't articulate why, but something about cool clock and the idea of someone bringing a clock to school and then being invited to the White House just makes it a great thing to throw in as a non sequitur. And if you disagree, your brain is normal. Your brain has not been rotted away by Twitter. And I do think that's a specific Twitter brain rot. I don't think that other websites' brain rots make you think like, hey, this dumb meme that comes from a post that the president once did, that goes into any other context and it's funny. Like, I think that that's a very specific Twitter.com brain rot. And if you're wondering what Ahmed's up to, apparently after this whole ordeal, his parents tried to sue the school district, but it was thrown out, and as that was going on, he was offered a scholarship to study in the nation of Qatar, and he's been there ever since. I do hope he's doing well. And as much mocked as his clock has been, it's definitely better than anything I can build. I start sweating buckets the moment I open an IKEA box. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing, where you get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On December 18, 2015, Max Landis tweeted, "I've come to slowly realize that Bright, my new script, if made well, could potentially be my Star Wars, and it feels crazy." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I don't know if any of this will be meaningful to non-film Twitter people, but this tweet is very important on film Twitter. For a couple reasons, and I'll go into more detail, but the main two are Max Landis sucks and Bright sucks. And honestly, even without that context, I think if you just know anything about movies at all, you can see why it might be a little hubristic to ever tweet that a movie you are writing could be your Star Wars. Just think about what it would be like if you were at a party and you were speaking with a young artist and he said, "You know, I think my next painting could be my Mona Lisa." Like, that's just an insane thing to say. Not only are you tempting fate, you just seem like a jackass. But I really can't emphasize enough that the fact that Max Landis is an incredibly unlikable person and Bright is a movie that mostly doesn't work really just makes this tweet sane. So who is Max Landis? Max Landis is, well, really was, a screenwriter in the 2010s. He got his first first big break co-writing the movie Chronicle with Josh Trank, and before Bright, he also had writing credits on movies like Mr. Right, American Ultra, and he co-created the TV show Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. And you might be saying, Jake, why does he suck? I like one or two of those things, and that's fine. I like one or two of those things. I like Chronicle, and I haven't seen it since theaters, but I liked it then, and I have a soft spot for Mr. Right, even though I know it does a lot of annoying screenwriting things. But the reason he sucks is because he is a horrible human being to women. He has a history of misogynistic comments and several accusations of sexual misconduct and even assault. Like, these are not headings you want to see on someone's Wikipedia page. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of any of the allegations, because that's not what the show's about, and I don't want to talk about that stuff if I don't have to. But suffice it to say, he has a long and repeated history of just being absolutely awful to women. And it was apparently an open secret in the industry forever. And you might be like, Jake, well then why was he allowed to get away with it? It's not like he's a big A-lister, he's just a screenwriter. Of course, that's because he's a Nepo baby. His father is longtime director John Landis. And you might be thinking, John Landis, look at that sweet old man. He must be so sad that his son is running around sullying his good name. Of course I kid. John Landis sullied his own good name when he let 3 people die, including 2 young immigrant children, because he didn't want to do a helicopter stunt safely when recording for Twilight Zone the movie. Okay, so I think it's clear why people don't like Max Landis, and the thing is, a lot of these allegations against him came to a head in 2017, when the movie Bright came out. And so people who knew who Max Landis is were rooting against the movie. And let's talk about Bright. Bright is a Netflix original film directed by David Ayer, who you might know as the director of movies like Fury and Suicide Squad. And the pitch on Bright is that it is a gritty crime drama set in LA where orcs, elves, fairies, and other magical creatures are real. And if that doesn't sound misguided enough, because honestly you probably could make a decent movie with that, but the thing the movie is trying to tackle with all of these elements is race in America. Like, I had not watched the movie until last weekend. I had put it off because it didn't seem that good, but I'm like, if I'm gonna talk about this tweet, I have to have seen Bright. And it is really nuts how much the movie is basically just like, orcs in this universe are like black people, and we're gonna make allegorical takes on it. And the thing is, using fantasy to tell allegorical stories about race and prejudice is actually a very good and useful thing to do. Except it's usually helpful to set those stories in, fictional civilizations, like Star Wars, for instance. But what they do instead is basically have a lot of scenes that feel like they could be in any crime drama about racist police officers, except they just cut and paste all of the black people out and replace them with orcs. And not that I think that there's a way to do this great, but I really can't emphasize enough how poorly this is handled. It's so incredibly on the nose, and it knows it's really on the nose. It literally has Will Smith kill a fairy and say the line, "Fairy lives don't matter today," in the first 10 minutes. And I know I'm just talking about this movie and not talking about the tweet, but I think it's really important to emphasize what movie we're talking about. And this is the movie he was comparing to Star Wars. Like, the man logged onto twitter.com and said, hey, my racist cops but fantasy movie is gonna be my Star Wars. Like, I think the comparison specifically to Star Wars is especially egregious, because he's talking about a movie and a series that is known for its extensive world building. And all of the world building he did was, what if some of the races were replaced with fantasy creatures? Like, I can't emphasize how much the setting of this movie is just LA, but a little bit different. Like, watching it, I was genuinely shocked by how little the world was changed by elves and orcs and fairies existing on Earth for at least 2,000 years. And so the movie came out, and it was universally panned. Rotten Tomatoes is a site that doesn't matter at all, but its tomato meter score is 26%. And you might be like, wow, it has an audience score of 83%, but you have to remember that general audiences have no taste whatsoever. I know I should probably walk that back, but like, have you ever talked to a random person on the internet about movies? Let me just put it this way. I suspect that there's a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram of people who gave a high rating to Bright on RottenTomatoes.com and people who signed a Snyder Cut petition. And honestly, go watch Bright for yourself on Netflix and let me know what you think. If you like it, more power to you. But the thing is, the consensus on the movie, both among critics and among the industry at large, was that it was bad. Like, there was going to be a sequel and they didn't even do that. And so this tweet became a punchline. Max Landis called his shot and it went disastrously. It was the screenwriting Twitter equivalent of when Matt Hasselbeck said, "We want a ball, we're gonna score," and then proceeded to throw a pick six in overtime. Cody Decker summed it up beautifully when he said, untalented serial abuser Max Landis once said, with a straight face, Bright would be, quote, his Star Wars. Instead, it turned out to be untalented serial abuser Max Landis is Bright. The tweet is often brought up when anyone in entertainment makes a lofty comparison of something they're making. Jupin brought it up when Dune's art director said that Villeneuve's Dune films will be, quote, up there with the Lord of the Rings series. Of course, the art director was absolutely right. And for the real film and entertainment nerds, it's really used a lot as a way of mocking Netflix. Like when in 2022, Netflix said that they wanted their own version of Star Wars, Andrew quote tweeted and said, I was under the impression that Bright was Max Landis' Star Wars. And David Ehrlich, a film critic who people never get mad at, once tweeted, and I think this is absolutely hilarious. One thing I love about mega-budget Netflix movies is that Max Landis thought Bright would be his Star Wars, and Zack Snyder's Star Wars turned out to be his Bright. What a world. Look, the lesson here is obvious. never compare any piece of art you're making to like the best piece of art. You can say you're inspired by it, like it's perfectly fine to say, hey, I'm inspired by Star Wars for this scene. Or it's perfectly normal to say, I ripped this shot off from Citizen Kane, I hope you like the homage. But to just say, I think I'm making my Star Wars is so stupid. Not to be an armchair psychologist, but that really feels like something you only would say if you were daddy's little boy in Hollywood and you knew people weren't going to make fun of you because they didn't want to get on the bad side of your father. Also, just as a film nerd thing, it's funny that anyone would say that they were going to make their Star Wars because, of course, George Lucas, when he made Star Wars, he was just making his Flash Gordon. Funny how things like that happen. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On December 6, 2013, Spaghettios tweeted, "Take a moment to remember, hashtag Pearl Harbor with us." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. When it comes to bad and insensitive brand tweets, this is the OG, this is the original, this is the Babe Ruth, this is what it's all about. Because yes, there are a lot of bad tweets from brands, but this might be the first major one, and if it's not the first major one, it's the best one. And by best, I obviously mean worst. Instead of just tweeting something like, "We remember all lives lost at Pearl Harbor," or whatever, they included a cartoon of a Spaghettio holding an American flag. And this was a disaster. It was immediately a punchline, people got legitimately angry about it, and so yeah, it was a big deal. And I had always been planning on covering this on 12/6. But a few months ago, a woman named Mandy reached out to me and told me that she works in social media and now in PR, and she was at Campbell's, the parent company of Spaghettios, at the time that this happened. And while she is not the one who authorized and put out the tweet, she was part of the team sent in to clean up the mess. And so I had a great discussion with her about what happened that day, why it happened when it did, and what's being done to prevent it from happening again now. So Mandy, you mentioned previously to me that you were not the one who posted this tweet, but what was the first you heard about it going up? Like, how were you brought into the situation?
Yeah. So, I had a colleague. I had been the Spaghettio social manager for about a year prior to this incident, and I had just been promoted into a position where I was doing more PR communications for Campbell's. And so the person that I handed Spaghettio social off to was taking over everything from me at the time. And I had been brought into it probably around like 6 o'clock in the morning when everybody discovered what was happening, because the worst part was that it happened overnight when everybody was basically asleep. So yeah, it was quite unfortunate.
So can you describe the scene at all of like what was it like? Was it a lot of hurried calls, a lot of hurried emails? Was there a boardroom involved?
It was, so again, I was working on the PR team and in communications, and so immediately there was a call with our director of communications, our executives, and we laid out a plan. We needed to take the tweet down immediately, and I was put back in charge of Spaghettios in the interim to try to figure out exactly how we were going to move forward. So I drafted up a document with a couple of different options for responses, including like, the apology tweet that we took it down, we didn't mean to offend, very classic corporate response, as well as laid out a calendar for how to move forward from there. So, like what was the content going to be? What were our guidelines? Were we going to use that ridiculous Spaghettio character that at the time we called Theo or VO? And we immediately stopped all posts with that character. And because the memes were the worst. The memes were the absolute
Yeah.
terror of this incident, because not only was the character photoshopped in some of the like worst possible situations and disasters in world history, but it was all over. It was in the news. It was everywhere.
And, I'm not at all trying to throw the person who tweeted it under the bus, but I'm curious, how does something like this happen, and how does it compare to now? Because I think that 2013 is obviously a much different world in social media.
Such a different
So,
time.
so how did it happen then, and what prevents something like it from happening now?
Yeah, so 2013 was a really interesting time. So it's important to note, like in 2012, that's the first time that Campbell's hired social media managers at all. So it was a brand new team in 2012, at the end of 2012. And at the beginning of 2013, Oreo tweeted that famous "you can still dunk in the dark" tweet from the Super Bowl, when the Super Bowl blackout happened during the halftime show. And that spurred on this pressure from every single executive that social media had to be real time and super relevant, and we had to be at the cusp of the conversation. What companies were doing at that time, they were putting together, at least Campbell's did, they put together a room just dedicated to watching real-time news and everything like that. So there was an enormous amount of pressure to be real time and to react to really anything that was happening in the zeitgeist, in the conversation, in the total social conversation. And so you put that kind of pressure on somebody who's fairly young, pretty young in their career, who's just looking for literally anything to talk about, to be part of the broader conversation, and you get that as a result. It was a person who probably didn't have the right historical context of what Pearl Harbor Day really meant as a day of national tragedy. It was more like a holiday, like a Memorial Day or something like that, probably, to this person. And so, again, I think that it was a lot of inexperience, as well as it was still very new for a lot of these companies to put this kind of pressure on people who were still fairly young in their careers. Nowadays, I think that it's much different. It is these kinds of brand fails, which, of course, we were on many top 10 lists of top 10 brand fails of all time. After all of these brand fails, I think that has become part of the training that goes into social media these days. So hopefully fewer of these incidences occur.
In your mind, like, where does this rank in terms of the worst of these? And you don't have to throw anyone else under the bus, but, like, because this is up there for me. And I don't know if there's one, like, is there one in the industry that's talked about more than this?
This has had a lot of staying power, unfortunately. Again, it's been brought, we were featured on John Oliver, and like this was pretty cataclysmic.
The problem is the cartoon. The problem is the cartoon, honestly.
Oh,
That's the
God,
problem.
it's so bad. It's
because,
so
like,
bad.
I'm going to talk about this in the rest of the episode, but, like, if another company, like, says something insensitive, you don't have a cartoon. It's the cartoon is the problem.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, like, as far as the offensive nature of the tweet, it could have been a lot worse.
Oh, for sure.
In terms of the content, right? Like, the content, it's not the worst thing that somebody could say, but it's the cartoon that's associated with it. And also, what business does Spaghettios have talking about Pearl Harbor Day? Absolutely none.
I very much want to thank Mandy for reaching out and coming on. That conversation was extremely illuminating. As she alluded to, with the cartoon, whose name I now know is Theo, a lot of people photoshopped him into tragedies and other horrible events. A lot of them I can't show because they're super violent and graphic tragedies. But for example, Tormny Pickles photoshopped him as a reflection on the Vietnam Memorial. GrayFlannelSuit.net photoshopped him into a painting of Lincoln's assassination. And yes, he was even photoshopped into the Zapruder film. And the Spaghettio's Pearl Harbor tweet is used as a reference anytime a brand does a bad or insensitive tweet. For example, it was referenced in 2021 when the Popeye the Sailor Man account made a post commemorating Memorial Day where the post is written in Popeye's manner of speaking, and there's a cartoon Popeye in their photo. When someone discovered a tweet with Little Caesars mascot holding an American flag for Memorial Day, someone pointed out that that's their version of the Spaghettios Pearl Harbor tweet. And when Chargers mascot Boltman visited the Pro Football Hall of Fame and paid respects to Junior Seau, a Chargers legend who died a few years earlier, Katie points out that this has big Spaghettios Pearl Harbor tweet energy. Also, it was referenced to what I consider the other worst brand tweet of all time, but I'll be covering that next year. I think Mandy summed it up best, that no one really needs to hear what Spaghettios thinks about Pearl Harbor, and that the pursuit of going viral in relation to current events and days on the calendar will cause you to screw up. With all that being said, this is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. It's a bad post, but I feel like, a lot of the reason it got so much mileage is because it was so early, and because of the damn cartoon. So when you think about it, Theo is the one to blame. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing. We get the weekly museum of not Twitter, where I cover everything that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On January 5th, 2014, Michael Irvin tweeted, "Man, when we played in that cold weather, we was cold." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Sports Tweet Saturday, and with the air getting chillier, I felt this tweet was only appropriate. Michael Irvin spoke a truth when he said, "Man, when we played in that cold weather, we was cold." Michael Irvin, for those who don't know, was a star wide receiver who played for the Dallas Cowboys in the 1990s, and he's from Florida, went to the University of Miami, played in Dallas, so he wasn't really used to the cold. I mean, he had a close relationship with snow, but the other kind of snow. Anyway, in 2014, long after he retired, as he's working as an analyst, he tweeted that when they played in the cold weather, they were cold. Of course, he didn't phrase it that way, because if he did, it would not be a famous tweet. Now, a thing I want to get out in front of is that he said in a 2020 interview with Pardon My Take that this tweet was kind of tongue-in-cheek. That he was tweeting in this way, going back and forth with someone, and the person he was talking to, their tweets were deleted, so it looks out of context. And honestly, I do believe this, because while Michael Irvin is not a Rhodes Scholar, his other tweets do not look like this. He also is someone with a sense of humor, so I would understand why he would think this is funny. But for whatever reason he tweeted it, this is one of the most totemic posts in football Twitter history. I truly could spend the next 10 minutes just showing a slideshow of photos of people at football games where it's cold, quoting this tweet. Instead, I'll just show you the most recent one, where last week Tej Seth took a photo from the snowy game in Buffalo and said, "Man, when we played in that cold weather, we was cold." And I'm sure he was cold. Buffalo is freezing. It also is often quoted when people are seen on the sideline wearing big jackets, like when this quarterback for Kansas State was seen wearing a big jacket. Brian Fisher says, thinking of the classic Michael Irvin tweet, "Man, when we played in that cold weather, we was cold." Because look at that guy. He's cold. And the thing is, while Michael Irvin may have been being tongue-in-cheek, I think there actually is like a sort of ecstatic truth to this tweet. Because a phenomenon that is very common in football, and if you're not an NFL fan or even a college fan, you're probably not aware of this, is that there definitely is a culture of players trying to act like they're not cold during cold weather games. Like during any game where it's very cold, particularly at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin, there will always be some players, usually linemen, who are not wearing sleeves at all. And you're like, what the hell is wrong with these guys? And they say something stupid like, "I'm not cold," or "I'm just in the zone." And so I think there's something cathartic almost of Michael Irvin admitting like, no, when we was in those cold weather games, we was cold. Like, yeah, when you're an active player, you don't want to admit that the elements are getting to you, particularly if you play somewhere like Dallas or in a dome where you're not affected by the elements. You want to be like, no, it doesn't matter. I played just as well at Lambeau Field as I do at home. But like, when you're in the cold weather, you're cold. Because I also spent most of my childhood in Florida, and I can say that I live in New York. A lot of times it's cold out, and I'm like, I am cold. I don't think that this tweet would be referenced as much if the elements, particularly as the playoffs roll around, were not such a common topic of discussion. Like Alex Gellhart quoted it when Diana Rossini reported that Bill Belichick, who was coaching the Patriots at the time, put temperature gauges on the tunnel for the New York Jets to remind them how cold it was in Foxborough, Massachusetts. Quoting this tweet was actually paired with a famous Michael Irvin clip by The Chill Guy when he said, visiting teams to Buffalo, Denver, Green Bay, Chicago, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Foxborough, KC, and East Rutherford. Basically, because when they played in the cold weather, they was cold, he's basically giving the following pep talk to the teams visiting those locations.
Listen to everybody. Nobody believes in you. What are you prepared to do about it? Don't let no one come into your house, take your meal, do what you need to do today. I'm not nervous. I'm just telling you.
I'll be completely transparent. I really just wanted to do that lip sync. But anyway, some other references people have made to it is people have pointed out that this kind of seems like something that Ollie Williams, the fictional weatherman from Family Guy, would say. And the one that probably makes me smile the most is that AJ captioned what looks like engagement photos with, "Man, when we took pics in that cold weather, we was cold." So yeah, it's a special tweet because it's worded funny. Like, it is worded in a silly way. It's worded very slangly, and so that's why it's memorable. But it's also extremely versatile because it's talking about something as universal as being cold. Everyone is cold from time to time. Like, yeah, I'm sure that this tweet never pops off on Hawaiian Twitter, but basically anywhere else, this tweet is applicable. Even when I was growing up in Florida, I was cold. It gets down to the 30s sometimes. And I am fully in agreement with Michael Irvin. I do not like the cold. If you have heard a humming in the background for this entire video, it's because I have a space heater on. You will never catch me in short sleeves at Lambeau Field. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On August 31st, 2013, Yoshichi tweeted, "Why do they call it oven when you in the cold food, out hot eat the food?" This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Subscriber Sunday, where my subscribers get to suggest and then vote on on which tweet I cover. I think I want to make clear up top is that this tweet is very dumb, and if you don't find it funny, that is perfectly fine. Because it's like half nonsense. It's not full nonsense because you can sort of make sense of what the joke is, but it is not coherent enough to call a joke, really. Personally, I find it pretty funny. I don't find it as funny as some other people do, but I also don't find it not funny. I know that that's not a very interesting take to have. But anyway, what does this all mean? To be honest, I always kind of intrinsically got what the humorous thing here was, but I didn't know how I'd be able to articulate it, so I looked around for people explaining it, because I know they would do a better job than me, and I actually found a really great explanation from this site called HiNative.com, where non-native speakers of a language ask native speakers of a language what something means. And a non-native speaker of English went to the site to ask what this sentence meant, and that makes sense to me, because if English was not my first language, there is no way I would understand this at all. And so honestly, I'm just gonna read this user Fonsky's response verbatim. I think it's really helpful. This is a meme. I first saw it in this image. I laughed because of how the sentence is written. It's like someone from another planet wrote it. Very strange, and I thought it was funny. Why do they call it oven? In English, the word oven sounds like the words of in. He wants to know why people call this kitchen appliance by this name. When you oven the cold food. This is the stupid part. He's pretending of in is a phrasal verb. It is not. This is not a common or sensible way to use these words. If you use real words, you would say put in. So it's basically, why do they call it oven when you put in the cold food? Of out, hot, eat the food. He is pretending of out is a phrasal verb. It is not. This would mean the opposite of put in, so pull out. So then it becomes, why do they call it oven when you put in the cold food, pull out, hot, eat the food? Many tools in English have names that describe what the tool does. A staple puts staples in things, a copier makes copies of things, a screwdriver drives in screws to things. The whole point is that he thinks oven, of in, have the wrong name. By his logic, they should be called an of out because you of out, pull out, hot food. Also, it's a nonsense meme you can post to confuse people, though. A lot of people have already seen it, so they'll probably not read it all and tell you to shut up. Rewritten, it becomes, why do they call it an oven when you put in the cold food and pull out the hot food to eat? This is extremely stupid, and even people who understand probably would not laugh. I thought it was funny, though, so thanks for reminding me of it. Honestly, man, A+. I would feel much worse about doing this episode if I did not find this explanation. So yeah, that's the explanation, such as it has an explanation. But I think what that explanation kind of shows is that the reason why this phrase is so sticky to people is because it does make sort of intuitive sense. Specifically, the part he talks about certain tools having the same name as their verb. I don't know how Yoshichi thought of this, but I do think it probably started with them observing that oven sounds a little bit like oven, and then reverse engineered this whole tweet from there. And the thing you can see if you look at the original tweet is that it does not have as much engagement as you would think from how far and wide this phrase has gone. That's because most of the popularity of this tweet, I think, is in other modes. Like, when I looked up a lot of the keywords in it, I didn't find any other tweets referencing it until years later. The first one I saw was in 2015. But from what I can tell, and Know Your Meme basically says this really took off when someone photoshopped it into John Arbuckle's text bubble in a Garfield cartoon. That image was so popular it actually got to the point that Yoshiji had to tell people that the original tweet was not from Garfield originally. So yeah, because the Garfield cartoon is where this phrase really took off, it will now be inextricably linked to Garfield forever, like there are other Garfield-related photoshops with it. But it is also now like in the repertoire of nonsense phrases to say in shitposts to confuse people when you're just trying to be annoying. And you can put it easily into other memes, like someone put it into the Magical Senpai meme, which is an anime meme that I definitely was familiar with before doing this video. It's also a great response to those dumb questions where someone will post thirst traps and say something like, what's on your mind? Or, what would you say to me? April here uses the phrase as an answer to one of those. And it's just a great thing to bring up as a non sequitur when talking about any current event. Early in 2020, Jackson says, day 3 of quarantine, I still haven't figured out why they call it oven when you oven the cold food, of out hot eat the food. When there were those 2 prompts going around a couple days ago that one asked what's your most woke opinion and one asked what's your least woke opinion, Derek responded to the least woke opinion one with why do they call it oven when you oven the cold food, of out hot eat the food. God, I'm getting really tired of having to say that correctly. When I looked at the phrase among people I follow, I was a little disappointed to learn that Pidge, friend of the show, once asked the actor who voices Barrett in Final Fantasy VII to say this phrase, but it didn't work. But it does make me think that if you have money laying around to spend on a cameo of someone who has a cool voice, maybe you should get them to say the phrase. Oddly enough, I think if this tweet made 5% more sense or 5% less sense, it would not be successful at all. It really only works because most people intuitively somewhat get what he's trying to say, and therefore the joke comes across. And the joke just being that it is a dumb, deep thought. Because if it was complete nonsense, it would just be easy to ignore. And if it made a little more sense, people might actually be like, yeah, why isn't an oven called that? It's in that sweet spot where it makes enough sense to realize what he's going for, but doesn't make enough sense to actually be taken seriously. And yes, I'm aware that this is just a dumb phrase that someone fired off over a decade ago, and I just spent this much time analyzing it, but that's what I do here. Follow me for new tweet every day, and if you want to participate in Subscriber Sunday, consider subscribing. You also get the Museum of Not Twitter, a weekly show where I talk about a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter. On April 5th, 2016, Carrie Fisher tweeted, "See, I don't know how to write someone privately. Help me, Obi-Wan, whoever the fuck you are. You're my only hoe." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Today is the first day of what I'm calling Rest in Tweets Week, where I cover tweets from people who are no longer with us. And of course, Carrie Fisher, legendary actress, died tragically a few days after Christmas in 2016. But when she was on Twitter, she was an icon. I mean, she was an icon off of Twitter too, but in terms of celebrities on Twitter, she was great. And this tweet might be her greatest. For one, like a lot of her tweets, it's pretty indecipherable to figure out exactly what she's talking about. It seems like just before this tweet, she accidentally tweeted something that was supposed to be a private message, but that tweet was definitely deleted, and there's no real record of what it was, so we just have to assume that that's what happened. And then why that becomes her doing a riff on a famous line she said in Star Wars, it's unclear to anyone but her. And why a gif of the great Shaquille O'Neal? Who knows? But that's why she was delightful on Twitter. Now, a thing that anyone who is online or real-life friends with me knows is that I have asked you in the past 3 months, hey, what's a tweet you would want to come onto my show to talk about? And this is the tweet that friend of mine and writer for themarysue.com, Rachel Leishman, answered. Because she is unequivocally the biggest Carrie Fisher fan I know. And so I wanted to talk to her briefly about what made Carrie Fisher's feed so special, what made her so special, why she was such an icon. So here it is. So Rachel, what made Carrie Fisher's Twitter iconic in the way that it was?
She barely used words. She used emojis, and you had to kind of decipher what she was talking about 90% of the time she was talking about anything. And it was just like her unfiltered thoughts at times, and very clearly was just like no one told this woman to not say things, and she would just like log on Twitter and say what she wanted and then leave. And I loved that about her.
And how does that, line up with her personality off of Twitter?
It's pretty much the same. It's like, it was like one of those very authentic things, because like learning that at conventions Carrie Fisher just put glitter on everybody, I was like, this is the woman that would put glitter on everyone, and her Twitter is like kind of reminiscent of that. Like, you're like, yes, that is a Carrie Fisher tweet, I can tell.
The "Help me, Obi-Wan, whoever the you are." I mean, I don't know, but that just sounds like you can imagine her saying that on like a late night couch.
Yeah, she's just sitting there with her Diet Coke and her legs crossed up saying, "Help me, Obi-Wan, whoever the you are. You're my only hoe." Mm-hmm. And I love it. It's my favorite tweet.
And what's your favorite Carrie Fisher anecdote off of Twitter? Like, when you think about Carrie Fisher and the life she lived, which, one of the more interesting lives anyone's ever lived, in my opinion. What's the one that you think's like, wow, she really lived?
Well, I have probably that right before she died, she released a book that admitted to her sleeping with Harrison Ford during Star Wars, and then she died, so it's like he can't ever say anything like negative about it. I think that is like actually one of the funniest things on the planet. Like, I love her, I miss her every day. Mm-hmm. But the fact that she was like, yeah, Harrison and Ford and I used to sleep together. Mm-hmm. Bye. Iconic.
And in that way, like, she's living your dream is what you'd say.
Well, that, yes. But just truly and honestly, when you break it down like that and you're like, wow, she really did just kind of turn around. She revealed all of Harrison Ford's like nonsense secrets from back then, and then was like, deuces. And I have to respect it.
I want to thank Rachel for coming on. I really could not do a Carrie Fisher tweet without talking to her. And with this specific tweet, I think what people like about it so much is that it is referencing the iconic franchise she was a part of, but it's done with an irreverence that is fun and is often not seen nowadays with celebrities. I'm not the first person to observe that celebrities nowadays are way too guarded or way too corporate, never say anything interesting. Especially when they're in a big IP movie or a franchise, the only things you ever get out of them are complete reverence towards the material, or like 5 years after things over, there'll be a big headline that says, "Celebrity XYZ, working on this franchise wasn't fun." And I think that made Carrie Fisher's relationship to Star Wars, which was complicated, and her relationship to fame, which was more complicated, interesting. And I think the thing that made Carrie Fisher so special is that some celebrities act like they don't care about fame. It's like, oh, I live on a farm, I only come to Hollywood to act, yada yada. But Carrie Fisher really did not care about fame. Because of all the nightmares that fame and having a famous mother brought her, she did not care about maintaining a perfect, pristine image in Hollywood. And so therefore she was allowed to be interesting. Which really does hit home on one of my biggest pet peeves about celebrity culture today, is that it feels like young people are always demanding their celebrities to be quote-unquote authentic, but then rake them over the coals when they step out of line even a centimeter on anything. Personally, I don't think you can demand someone be authentic and conform at the same time, but what do I know? People reference this tweet a lot, especially when they're doing Princess Leia cosplays. Just two quick examples are from Ainsley and from Savannah. It was shared in the lead up to the Obi-Wan series when stills and trailers were released, and Silent Princess made this absolutely wonderful drawing of Princess Leia giving the finger to R2-D2 with a quote on it. And yes, I did send this over to Rachel to see if she wanted to get a print of it. I will say, if you're young or just have never really delved into it, look into Carrie Fisher's life. It is so rich and interesting. And it is also, in a lot of ways, tragic. A thing that becomes wilder and wilder to me as I get older is to think about the fact that she was 19 when they made the first Star Wars. If I was 19 and I immediately became a massive superstar and a sex symbol out of nowhere because of a big sci-fi movie, I too would probably have a lot of the same problems she had. And of course, her story is not an entirely tragic one. After her movie stardom, she became one of the biggest script doctors in Hollywood. Like seriously, she did uncredited writing on tons and tons of classic movies, particularly in the 90s. And then she had a comeback with the Star Wars sequels. Whatever you think about them, she came in and she did great work in them. But they really just don't make them like her anymore, and I think that she's a special person to talk about. Even if she does do a British accent for some reason in her first scene in Star Wars. Seriously, go back and watch that scene. She does a British accent. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing, where you can watch the Museum of Not Twitter, a weekly series where I talk about a thing that was big on the internet that not started on Twitter, and also you can vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On April 5th, 2012, Radmilk tweeted, "Apparently there's no such thing as a bladder, and pee is stored in the balls, and that's why I pee myself every time those teens kick me in the balls." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Rest in Tweets Week, where I'm spending a week talking about tweets from people who are no longer with us. And yes, I'm aware of the elephant in the room in regards to the guy who tweeted this. Don't worry, I'll get to it at the end. But this is the tweet where pee is stored in the balls came from. And that's kind of surprising if you look at its stats. It's not a very popular tweet. You would think that the first mention of a phrase that ended up becoming a pretty popular, even if dumb, meme would have more than 55 retweets. But that just kinda is how the internet works sometimes. Now, KnowYourMeme.com tracks the growth of the phrase pee is stored in the balls as first really being spurred by this guy J.M. Cook, who tweeted it as part of a hashtag that was later featured in Cosmopolitan magazine. And then that led to model and longtime Twitter power user Chrissy Teigen tweeting, "Is pee stored in the balls?" And those of you who are not on Twitter between like 2012 and 2018, you don't know. Chrissy Teigen really was a kingmaker when it came to Twitter. A Chrissy Teigen endorsement could really make someone's Twitter career, it could make a meme. She really had a lot of power. And while I'm aware of the certain problematic elements about her, I always did appreciate that she was like a big celebrity who did like to mix it up with genuine posters. Once again, it does not absolve bad things people have to say about her, but it does make me happy to know that even if you are super rich and super beautiful and married to John Legend, you're like, you know what? I want to read some dumb, weird Twitter jokes. Because that's what the original pee is stored in the balls tweet was. It was a weird Twitter joke. I've talked about weird Twitter at length previously. It was basically a collection of not famous people on Twitter making sort of inane jokes, usually with cartoon avatars. And Radmilk fit this to a T. Had pee is stored in the balls not become a popular phrase, this tweet would have been a perfectly normal Radmilk tweet. But what happened instead is that pee is stored in the balls just became a very funny thing to say. It became especially funny to put those words in someone else's mouth. One of the earliest uses of it as a meme that KnowYourMeme.com could find was this Photoshop where it shows it as a quote that Winston Churchill said, but people have also put it in the mouth of Albert Einstein. It's a great thing to Photoshop on a sign that someone you don't like holds up, like this one of Greg Abbott. And would you look at that? A very handsome and funny tweeter once did a joke where he Photoshopped a headline to say that Betsy DeVos was mandating that schools teach that pee is stored in the balls. Okay, before I show more references, we have to talk about it. Why is this so funny? One, you might not think this is funny at all. You might think this is all juvenile, and in which case you probably have tuned out by now. But if you agree that it's funny, I think it's for a couple reasons. One, obviously, toilet humor is always funny. Talking about pee and talking about balls is gonna be funny. But I think the key to it, especially when it comes to putting it in other people's mouths, making other people say it, I think the key to it being funny is that it's something that is so obviously untrue, but is like really low stakes. But it's also conceivably something that a really dumb person could believe. Like, it's just a little smarter than the sky is green. For instance, you couldn't convince your 8-year-old cousin that the sky is green, but you probably can convince your 8-year-old cousin that pee is stored in the balls. And so by making someone else say that pee is stored in the balls, The joke basically is that you're implying that they have a child's understanding of anatomy. And there are also a lot of funny implications with the idea that pee is stored in the balls. Like Rad Milk suggests in the original tweet that getting kicked in the balls would make you pee. And people have done jokes talking about those implications, like friend of the show Bucky Isotope, who once tweeted, all scientists agree that pee is stored in the balls, but women don't have balls, so do they just not pee? Or Marcy the Swag Lord, who expanded the lore by saying, farts are stored in the cheeks, in the same way that pee is stored in the balls. And because of the absolute silliness of it, it's something that is always made more funny when you surround it with official language, or you put it into something that sounds official. Like journalist David Roth, who once imagined a conversation between a reporter and Donald Trump going, Mr. Trump, you've insisted numerous times that pee is stored in the balls, in that bag. I believe this is true. I've seen proof of it. Look, it's an incredibly silly phrase, but it honestly still makes me smile. And I'm clearly not the only one. Only a few years ago, a guy named Lone Little Jerry on YouTube made a fake Daft Punk song called Pee is Stored in the Balls. It goes like this. Okay, so now let's talk about the aforementioned elephant in the room. And if you don't want to get bummed out, I would stroll away. One of the reasons I called this the Museum of Twitter, and not the Twitter Hall of Fame, which a lot of people call it, is because I don't want to imply that I'm trying to honor the people themselves who did these tweets. Because I think that the phrase pee is stored in the balls is an important phrase in the history of Twitter, and so therefore it needs to be in a museum about Twitter. But I would not want to honor Rad Milk, the person. As I mentioned up top, this week is all going to be tweeters who are no longer with us. And the complicated thing about that, in reference to this tweet, is that the reason why Rad Milk, real name Everett Byram, is no longer with us is because he was shot and killed by police when they were responding to a domestic violence call, and he basically charged at them with a katana. I know that that sounds silly, but there's body cam footage, and that's basically what happened. It's pretty clear that he is trying to provoke the cops into shooting him, which just makes this extra sad. And people who knew him said he basically gone off the deep end over the last couple years of his life. He started being abusive towards his wife, like I mentioned, that's why she called the police, but he also started being really hateful and going on hateful rants. He actually lost a job because of hateful stuff he was putting on Facebook. He got really into substances and alcohol. And it's just a really unfortunate situation. And it is one of those complicated things where it's like, wow, this guy clearly was dealing with awful mental health stuff. But he also was being absolutely awful to the people in his life and people online. So, like, what do you make of that? And that's why, on multiple occasions, people had suggested this tweet and said, like, wait, you'll probably never do it because of what happened to Rad Milk. And honestly, that might be true, but not to be too self-aggrandizing. But if you're, like, to make a museum about, like, jazz music, inevitably there's going to be someone who made an important jazz song, who later in life had a bunch of issues and hurt a lot of people, and you gotta talk about it, I think. And so yeah, there are some people who are like being very glib about his death, and I understand that. People on Twitter are glib. But like I said, it just made me really sad. Like any time that someone dies, leaving behind a wife and 2 children, the youngest of which being 15 months, like, that's sad, I'm sorry. Now one thing I cannot pretend is not funny is that after he died in this manner, someone dug up an old tweet from 2015 where he said, "Burder, I'm a white guy. Pantomime's not getting shot by cops." This is just like, I can't believe he tweeted that. Like, there's just something comedically great about the fact that the tweet is about not getting shot by cops. It's like the "what are you gonna do, stab me" quote, except it took like 7.5 years to pay off. And so anyway, I really apologize that the pee is stored in the balls episode ended up being like the biggest bummer of any episode I've ever done. But the thing is, I wouldn't have felt right if I didn't cover it at all, because it's a pretty big meme. And I also wouldn't have felt right if I covered it and had a bunch of comments being like, are you going to talk about what happened with Rad Milk? Are you going to talk about what happened with Rad Milk? Like, I don't know, I want to give you guys the full context. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter. On August 10, 2017, Young Dolph tweeted, "What the hell is this shit I'm hearing about Korea?" This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. We're continuing on with Rest in Tweets Week, a week where I cover tweets from people who are no longer with us, and today we are honoring this gem from the late Memphis rapper Young Dolph. Young Dolph was a much beloved rapper, particularly in the city of Memphis, and he was tragically killed in 2021. But before that, on top of putting out really popular music, he also put out this tweet where he had to know what was going on with Korea. And this was a super relevant time to ask this question. It was when North Korea was doing missile tests and Donald Trump kept ratcheting up the rhetoric and Kim Jong-un ratcheted up the rhetoric. Like Korea said they might bomb Guam. It was a crazy time. So it was not completely out of nowhere for him to ask what the hell was going on with Korea. But obviously the reason why it's a notable tweet is because of the way it is worded. Like, I just love the idea that Young Dolph was like hearing whispers like, "Hear about Korea? See the Korea this," and then it's like, what the hell is this shit I'm hearing about Korea? And I say this not casting any aspersions, but there really is a specific type of person that would rather tweet out to their followers, what the hell is this shit I'm hearing about Korea, instead of just like Googling news about Korea. I do love what Mick Coley asked a few months later. I'd like to interview the person who told Dolph what was happening in Korea. Why was it brought up? Did Dolph's jaw break when he hit the floor? How often does he ask for updates on what's going on over there? And I think the reason why the tweet went viral at the time is because it actually was a stressful time, because we were getting news updates and it seemed like something crazy could happen any second. And so in that way, Dolph's reaction was completely normal. Now, it should come as no surprise at all that this tweet was brought up, retweeted, and referenced after the events that happened in Korea last week. Specifically, the president of South Korea trying to do a coup by putting in martial law and sending troops to the National Assembly. Big Snugga, for instance, posted a screenshot of the tweet, and Dance Yourself Dean even apologized for taking so long to retweet the post. The tweet was retweeted on the day that Dolph died. Delph says, "We really lost a king today." And Almighty Noticer pointed out that it is the greatest foreign policy stance of all time. And it's referenced jokingly in situations like when Aaron West says, "Every time Heung-Min Son scores a banger," referring to the soccer player Heung-Min Son. And perhaps my favorite reference to it was when Vic Damone Jr. tweeted, "What the hell is going on?" Flirt Reynolds quoted it and said, "Dolph," when he found out about North Korea. There's just always something funny about a celebrity coming on and being like, "Wait, what's this big news event going on?" And there is an innocence to it, because Dolph could have just ignored whispers about Korea or whatever and gone on with his day, but he needed to log on and like, yeah, I need to get to the bottom of this. I need to know what the hell's going on with Korea. And I hope he was informed. I hope he ended this day with more knowledge about what was going on in Korea than he started it with. Because if the internet cannot inform a Memphis rapper about geopolitics going on across the globe, what good is it for? Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing once a week that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On September 23rd, 2013, Liam Payne tweeted, "Are you not reading what I'm saying? It's a snake habitat. Turn around." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Rest in Tweets Week, where I'm talking about tweets from tweeters who are no longer with us, and this one came across my timeline when Liam Payne just died a few months ago. When Directioners were reminiscing about him on Twitter for good and for ill, a lot of people brought this one up. And I looked up to see what it meant, because to a non-Directioner, this didn't make a lot of sense to me. At the very least, I didn't understand why it was funny. So according to an interview he did with Twitter Music, which is now defunct, surprise, surprise, One Direction was doing a show in Adelaide, Australia, and around the hotel they were staying at, there was a snake habitat between where they were and where fans were. And so before the snake habitat turnaround tweet, he tweeted, "Girls behind the hotel, please get out of the fields. There's a huge sign saying snake habitat. It's just not worth it. Someone's gonna get hurt." And so that explains why his next tweet is more forceful, saying, "Are you not reading what I'm saying? It's a snake habitat turnaround." Years later, his fellow One Direction member, Louis Tomlinson, was asked about it, and he had this to say.
It was really sweet of Liam because he was concerned about everyone. I think he'd forgotten that the locals, of course, were used to all of this. And I think for some reason he thought that he had to put that out there to look after everyone, which was pretty sweet, but also mildly hilarious at the time. He won't mind me saying that.
And the thing is, I've never really been in a fandom that's so crazy that people would be willing to run through snake habitats. Really, I have no experience being in a pop fandom at all. And so I reached out to a high school friend named Allison, who was the biggest Directioner I knew back in the day. I wanted to get her memories on what One Direction was like on social media at the time, what the frenzy was like, and whether this story sounds credible. Allison, what would you describe the tenor of the One Direction fandom around the time this was tweeted, 2012, 2013, 2014?
So around the fandom around One Direction that time, that was when it was like at its most insane. It was also kind of toward the beginning-ish of it. I know I became a fan of One Direction in I think it was late 2011, early 2012, because I remember I went to their concert tour in June of 2012. And even then, it was just absolute intensity, insanity. Girls, guys, everyone was willing to do whatever they could to get close to the five guys in One Direction. They were just absolutely insane. And on Twitter, people were tweeting at them, everything, every possible thought. It was absolutely insanity.
And a thing that, I notice is that it feels like today, big pop stars interact with people online a lot less. What was the level of interaction that the actual 5 One Direction members had with fans on Twitter back in the day?
So I would say they had more fan interaction than like other pop stars of the era. Like there was like a chance that they would see your tweets and tweet back, like especially if you said something funny or something witty or something that they liked, they would tweet back at you. I mean, I remember I was, 16 years old using Twitter, had unrestricted internet access, and I tweeted at them constantly, like especially Niall and I know it was especially Niall and Harry because they were my favorites. But people were just tweeting at them constantly, trying to get them to notice them, get them to say something back, to like, to retweet, to reply, anything.
And you said that they would do anything to get close to them. Would you say that it's would you say it's completely reasonable to expect One Direction fans to go through, I don't know, a snake habitat?
I mean, it's not reasonable to expect a normal person to do that, but I would say, like, yeah, it would have been typical for One Direction fans to do something like that. I know when I went to their concert, my friend and I ran around back of the venue as fast as we could to try just to like wave at their tour buses as they were pulling out. I know that it would not be out of the question for them to have to be like, don't climb over a snake habitat to get to us.
What do you think it was that led One Direction to sort of pull back on social media? Do you think it was, when Zayn left, or was it just aging, or do you not have a coherent theory?
I mean, I don't have an exact coherent theory, but I know, like, speaking from my personal experience, like, as I feel like as like celebrities get bigger, they tweet less as they become more of like a mainstream pop artist. They start engaging with fans less and less, like, especially even back in the days of, like, in the 2010s, big pop stars like Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, they didn't actually, Justin Bieber even, they didn't engage with their followers. They were just like tweeting out their random thoughts, and then everyone would be saying something back just to try to get a reaction from them, and they said nothing. One Direction was definitely kind of like the anomaly of the time, and as they got bigger, I feel like they had to pull back. PR moves.
Yeah. And is there any other One Direction moment on Twitter that you'd like to highlight?
If I'm allowed to broaden the scope, it was when Niall recently. It was pretty recently. He was on, I think it was Instagram Live, and he was sitting in like a dark room, and someone on the live commented, "You're in the dark," and he immediately goes, "Someone just told me you're in the dark," and he called them Sherlock Holmes and like snapped back at them. He's like, "Let me tell you what, Sherlock Holmes, you're onto something." Like, someone just said, "You're in the dark." Well, I tell you what, Sherlock Holmes, you are unbelievable. Calling them an idiot. It was one of the best moments that I've had, like, seen of them recently.
I want to thank Allison for coming on. I would not have felt good about doing this episode if I did not have the honest opinion of a real Directioner. As fandoms are wont to do, they turned this Liam tweet about a snake habitat into a meme. Among other things, people photoshopped snakes onto a photo of Liam. And then someone turned that Photoshop into a fake album cover called Snakes on a Payne. And when Liam got into some controversy in 2022 by saying, among other things, that the band was actually built around him, Cass tweeted, "Turns out Liam Payne was the snake habitat all along." But a thing I absolutely love is that Jess and her friend visited what they call a national landmark. That's right, they visited the snake habitat sign in Adelaide. They didn't just visit it, they brought a figurine of Liam and put him on top of the snake habitat sign. I really don't know why this brings me so much joy, but I think it's because there's something about turning the mundane into something special. There's nothing objectively special about this snake habitat sign, but because of a tweet that was fired off years before, it is like a thing to take a pilgrimage to. And obviously it's silly and it's not actually important. But there is something I just love about humans' ability to create meaning from basically nothing. That sign just says snake habitat, but the meaning of it is so much more than that because of decisions that random humans on the internet have made. Pop fandom is scary, weird, and hard to understand, and often can be really harmful to people. But the way that the dumbest, most inane things can become important is like an insane sociological phenomenon. So while pop stans often do things I disagree with, and sometimes I find them to be really annoying, they will always have somewhat of a respect for me. Because turning something as simple as a warning about a snake habitat into a meme takes effort, it takes time, it takes thought. And that's something that I think on the internet needs to be respected. Also, they really do scare me. I don't want to say anything bad about them. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big in the internet that did not start on Twitter. On August 10, 2011, Harris Whittles tweeted, "Wheat thins? Call me when they're wheat thicks. Give me that wheat." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It is still Rest in Tweets Week, where I'm covering tweets from people who are no longer with us. And this tweet comes from the late, great comedy writer Harris Whittles. Harris Whittles passed away in 2015, but before that, he was a prolific stand-up and comedy writer. He's probably best known for his work on Parks and Rec, where he actually had a role as Harris, one of the animal control guys. This guy.
Oh, this is a napkin where I wrote down a cool name for a dog. Barack Obama.
He also was a legendary podcast guest on Comedy Bang Bang, and he was a great Twitter user. I picked this tweet out because it's one of his more popular tweets, and it's probably my favorite tweet of his, but I mostly wanted to do this episode because I wanted to talk about his Twitter generally. His most important contribution to Twitter is that he literally created the word humble brag. Like, he wrote a book on it. A humble brag is when you say something that sounds like you're complaining about something, but you're really bragging about something else. Like if you were to say, oh, I'm so tired this week. My schedule's been packed with a bunch of fancy parties. But really, his Twitter was at its most magical when he made these dumb observations, like saying that there should be wheat thicks. I think this sort of tweet is very characteristic of like pre-2015, 2016 Twitter. And I would say that unintentionally, this is often the voice that I write tweets in. The sort of like semi-ironic, detached, like just making an observation, like, you know, wheat thins? I prefer wheat thicks. But to discuss the breadth of Harris's Twitter, why this tweet itself is so special, I reached out to Emily Ward, who's a Twitter mutual, who her name kept coming up when I was looking up Harris Whittle's tweets, so I'm like, clearly she has something to say about him, so let's go to that conversation. So Emily, I reached out to you pretty last minute about this, and told you we were doing the wheat thicks tweet. And do you mind showing the audience what you showed up wearing?
Yes, I literally do have a wheat fix, give me that wheat t-shirt.
So how did you first come upon Harris's Twitter feed? How did you first encounter him as a stand-up performer, etc.?
Yeah, it was actually through Comedy Bang Bang.
Mm-hmm.
He did an entire bit about his Twitter feed on Comedy Bang Bang, where he would read his drafts of his tweets. It was called Harris's Phone Corner.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody misheard him say it. It turned into Harris's Phone Corner.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you really want to deep dive on sort of his thought process, which, spoiler alert, is there one? It's all there. So go look into the archives of Comedy Bang Bang or the best ofs. That you can find them all there. But really, that's where you can hear literally him say this out loud, and everybody's like, what? You want to say that? You want to put that out into the world? Okay, man.
Wheat thins? Call me when they're wheat thicks. Give me that wheat.
So, you know, his tweets have a unique voice. Like, how would you describe the voice that his tweets generally come from?
I think they're very just like, and I mean this with the most love and respect, stupid and silly and goofy. Like, I love a thing that is stupid. And, you know, that's really what he was doing, was just very like play on words, something very just like right off the top of his head, just would say it. And I think that's what it would get a good laugh. It's just funny.
And, you know, obviously he passed away in 2015. How do you feel like his Twitter account is part of his legacy?
I think it really captures like his essence to just say what was on his mind and just like to go for it. It's really all there. Like, a lot of the best of his stuff is there.
Other than Wheat Fix, is there a tweet that you think about his a lot?
So when they were announcing that they were going to start deactivating accounts, the first thing I thought of was his account. I even tweeted at his sister to try to like log on and try to save it, but I was also screenshotting them.
To be clear to the audience, Harris's sister did get access to the account and it is still up.
Yes. Oh, a personal favorite of mine is coleslaw, cabbage and mayonnaise is disgusting, because I personally hate coleslaw.
I remember he had one that was, and I didn't look it up beforehand, was saying that he didn't trust crepes because he didn't trust anything that could be both a vessel for chocolate and ham. Or I found one that was like, is it just me or is all plutonium weapons grade?
Yes, that was what I saved. Or just like, I could hear this in his voice. Like, I straight up do not understand deductibles. That's it. That's just me, like that. And that's just so mean.
Yeah.
Or just
and I feel like in a way, his tweets really are of an era, because I feel like people really stopped tweeting like this in like 2016.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. He has a really like prescient one on his tweets, which is putting together a top 10 who mourned him best list. Get your votes in now. Yeah. I felt like that one was really real, like when I was going through it when he passed away.
Yeah.
So, you know, I feel like anytime somebody famous dies, like that's like one of the first things I think about is that tweet, because there's always a list of people who are just pulling that one out.
I want to thank Emily again for coming on. I think that is nice that a lot of people, even in 2024, still reference this tweet whenever they eat wheat thins. Like Amanda quote tweeted it when she was demolishing a box of wheat thins. Ryan Hudson had a box of wheat thins that was almost entirely baked together crackers and thought that Harris would be so happy. And Dana Wessel, I think, says something that I agree with, which is that she could live to be 9,000 years old and this will still make her laugh. Look, I might be stretching the definition of the word important by covering this tweet. Not that any tweet's really important, but I just knew if I was going to do a week dedicated to tweeters that are no longer with us, it would be malpractice to not include Harris. Especially because his death is long enough ago now that there's a whole generation of people who might even have been on Twitter since their teenage years who would never saw him at all. And he's someone who is definitely like your favorite tweeter's favorite tweeter. I just don't think you can tell the story of inane joke Twitter without the name Harris Whittles. I also don't think you can tell the story of comedy in the early 2010s without him generally, but with Twitter specifically, you definitely can't tell that story. And I remember, I was a huge Parks and Rec fan. I was a fan of listening to him on Comedy Bang Bang. I was a huge fan of his Twitter feed. His death was really a shock and a tragedy. It really was horrible. He was one of those dudes who was, like, beloved by everyone who knew him. He was such a funny guy. His Parks and Rec character is only in it for, like, probably 20 minutes in the whole show over all the seasons, and he's so memorable. And so yeah, I just want to do an episode kind of in honor of him, and including what I think his funniest tweet is. And I do really wish that I did this episode while eating Wheat Thins the whole time, but longtime viewers know that I have celiac disease, and as much as I love doing the show, and as much as I love Harris Whittles' Twitter feed, I'm not going to give myself big stomach problems just for a video. Sorry. By the way, I didn't actually even explain why this tweet is funny, but it's not easy to explain at all. It's just silly, it's stupid. Like, why would someone want wheat thicks? What does that even mean? Like, the joke obviously comes from the idea that if they're called Wheat Thins, that implies the existence of something called Wheat Thicks, but, like, it's just stupid. Anyway, sorry to tag that on to the end, but I realized I didn't do that in the beginning. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing so you get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On June 22nd, 2015, Tom Brodu tweeted, @LeBron James, "You like what you see?" This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It is both Sports Tweet Saturday and Rest in Tweets Week, the week where I'm covering tweets from people who are no longer with us. And Tom Brodude was an icon of weird Twitter who unfortunately passed away in 2016. But before he left this earth, he gave us some great tweets, including this one. Honestly, it's just such a great post. Every element of it is so perfectly bad. Obviously, starting it off with @LeBron James is wonderful. LeBron James is just funny. And the idea of someone thinking that that is LeBron James's actual name and trying to tag him in a tweet is funnier. And the all lowercase with just the letter U, "you like what you see." And then definitely the best part of it is that it is a Shutterstock image of a basketball. I just love the implication that the person who's tweeting this thinks that LeBron James is going to see a stock image of a basketball and be like, "Wowie zowie, I'm really liking what I'm seeing." I know I'm spelling out the obvious, and I know that my radiator is whistling, so ignore that, but it's just so funny to think that because LeBron James plays basketball and good at it, he would be, like, infatuated or excited by just a stock photo of a basketball. That is a really funny comedic conceit. People have done it with iconic figures in other fields, like someone said, "You like what you see?" @Torm Barty with a photo of a football. @JD Vanace, "You like what you see?" with a photo of a couch. And this one is referencing a tweet that I will cover in the future, but Benny says, "You like what you see?" @Darren Rovell with a photo of a Harriet Tubman collectible card. But the classic use will always be with LeBron James. Like, anytime a photo of just a basketball on a white background comes onto the timeline, someone will quote it and say, "You like what you see." When someone got a message from their computer saying, "Like what you see," they tagged LeBron James. And whenever there's anything else LeBron James related going on, people will find a photo related to it and tag LeBron saying, "You like what you see." Sorry, we'll tag LeBron James and saying, "You like what you see." Like when LeBron started talking about Taco Tuesday, eventually he tried to copyright it, Shrikar tweeted @LeBron James with a stock photo of a taco. When the Lakers were in the finals in 2020, Shocker Saman tweeted @LeBron James, "You like what you see," with a photo of the Larry O'Brien trophy. And in the NBA bubble, when there was talk about going on a Wildcat strike, Bob Mapplethorpe posted a photo of General Strike to LeBron James, "You like what you see." It's honestly just such a funny conceit. And it's so simple. And like I said, Tom Brodude had lots of great tweets. This is not the last of his that I'll cover, but this might be the one with the longest lasting legacy. And it was brought up when Gaga Daily posted a quote from Lady Gaga where she said, "When you leave this earth, no one's gonna give a f*** what you tweeted." And Diego305 quote tweeted that and said, "Wrong. Tom Brodude has been dead for a while, and anytime I see LeBron, I think of this." And I think that that's a thing that people who are not extremely online don't get, is that, like, it's not as concrete as a legacy in music or movies or whatever, but people who are on Twitter can leave a legacy. People who are around Twitter, especially weird Twitter at this time, all remember Tom Brodude. He had an impact on all of us. And the laughs that this tweet has generated are not nothing. The smiles and laughs it generated are as real as any other reaction to any other piece of art. And yeah, when I look at this tweet, I like what I see. It's very funny. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing. You get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On June 20th, 2020, Herman Cain tweeted, "Here's just a few of the hashtag Black Voices for Trump at tonight's rally. Having a fantastic time. hashtag Tulsa Rally 2020, hashtag Trump Tulsa, hashtag Tulsa Trump Rally, hashtag MAGA, hashtag Trump 2020, hashtag Trump 2020 landslide. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Subscriber Sunday, the day where my subscribers get to pick and then vote on which tweet I cover, and it's the final day of Rest in Tweets Week, a week where I'm covering tweets from people who are no longer with us. And one can say it's incredibly appropriate to end this week on a tweet that in some ways caused the tweeter's death. Not the tweet itself, but the event that this is tweeted from likely caused the death of Herman Cain. Herman Cain was a businessman. He was the former CEO of Godfather Pizza, who became a Republican politician mainly during the 2012 presidential primary, the one where he released an ad where he made this face. And in 2020, when COVID was still all over, when there was a ton of lockdowns, when no one was doing gigantic events, the Trump campaign did a gigantic rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a bad idea for a lot of reasons, but it was definitely a bad idea in the not spreading COVID-19 sense. But Herman Cain, a man who had previously survived stage 4 cancer, so clearly had a compromised immune system, showed up anyway. Not only did he show up, he made sure to brag that he was there not wearing a mask. And wouldn't you know it, just 10 days later, he publicly announced that he had COVID-19. And a few weeks after that, he passed away from COVID-19. This is all obviously incredibly ironic. And I think a lot of people who have memory hold 2020 forget how regular an occurrence this was. It feels like every day there's a side-by-side of someone's Facebook post saying, the government can't make me wear a mask, and then this is John's wife. He passed away in the ICU tonight because of COVID-19. And so Herman Cain became like the poster boy for this phenomenon because he was a very famous person. A Reddit called r/Herman Cain Award popped up, and it became big enough to warrant getting a Wikipedia page, which is not something you can say for most subreddits. And the subreddit was mostly this phenomenon. People making posts either saying that they didn't think COVID was real or that it wasn't that serious, and then another post from them, or maybe a news article about them saying that they got sick and maybe died. Most of the posters regular people, and I thought about doing like a slideshow of them, but I don't know, I feel a little bit gross being like, this regular person died 4 years ago, gawk at them, even if they did die out of ignorance. But a lot of them are also other public figures, like this guy, Doug Erickson, who died in 2021 after railing against COVID vaccine mandates and COVID restrictions. He passed away from COVID. So he, in this case, got a Herman Cain Award. Now, the craziest part of the Herman Cain saga, and I know all of the people who comment, what about this, before the video's over, will have already commented about this, is that after Herman Cain died, his Twitter account still kept tweeting. And that's not the craziest thing in the world. Sometimes public figure Twitter accounts pivot to tweeting about the person after they die. But in this case, they tweeted COVID misinformation. The Twitter account, which was rebranded as The Cain Gang, tweeted, it looks like the virus is not as deadly as the mainstream media first made it out to be. They said this after the person for whom the account is named died of this virus. This level of cognitive dissonance almost feels impossible to fathom until you remember everything about the MAGA movement. And I really feel like this Twitter saga, Herman Cain tweeting before his death and then the account tweeting after his death, became such a big deal on Twitter because so much of what was going on was impossible for those of us who actually were taking the virus seriously, who actually believed, scientists. It was so hard for us to fathom how other people were experiencing it. And these felt like the most extreme examples of the phenomenon we couldn't understand. And so while it always is a little bit gross to take any sort of pleasure in someone else getting sick and or dying, I think that those of us who drastically changed our lives and were giving up things that we enjoyed to avoid the virus had to have some sort of feeling of they can't get away with this. They can't keep doing things that we know are bad and are bad for those around them and not have anything bad happen to them. Because frankly, it felt deeply unfair that there were people who were just acting like there wasn't a deadly virus that they needed to avoid. And a lot of those people didn't get sick at all. And so when people who are really loud and obnoxious about not believing in COVID got sick, there's a sort of yeah, karma got you. Of course, that's not actually how the world works. Although a lot of people died because they believed COVID misinformation, most people who believed in COVID misinformation are fine. They're still alive. And I also think that there was a hope among a lot of people, particularly, genuine, earnest liberals, that if COVID-19 actually affected someone or someone in someone's life, they might change their ways about how seriously they took it. And sometimes it did happen. But I think the fact that the Herman Cain account tweeted COVID misinformation after Herman Cain died of COVID really shattered the idea that there's ever a breaking point with a lot of these people. That when you go that far down the road of misinformation, there's actually nothing at all that could change your mind. The thing about looking back on this 4 years later, which is extra dispiriting, is yeah, these people totally won. Yes, lots and lots of people died of COVID and lots of those people believed in misinformation. But like I said, most of the people who believe in misinformation are still alive, and because they're still alive, they probably still believe all that misinformation. And so in that way, I feel a little less bad about people taking pleasure in the deaths of people who are spreading misinformation, because it's That's just a consolation prize. We lost the actual game. So yeah, while it is also irrational, I think it makes a lot of sense for people to try to make some sort of karmic justice out of something as random as a virus. Because of course, a lot of the people who were harmed by COVID were not people who believed a lot of misinformation. And there wasn't a major rhyme or reason to whose lives it took. But if there's one thing that humans are going to do, it's try to come up with some karmic justice to make sense of the random events in front of them. And so thus, the Herman Cain Award was born. Thanks for everyone who watched Long and Rest in Tweets Week, and you can follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing so you can do things like vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays, and also you can get the Museum of Not Twitter, a weekly series where I cover something that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter. On November 7th, 2010, Jawbroken tweeted, November 5, 2010, I hate the Muppets because of the pig girl. She was disgusting. I hate her with my life. She does not leave the lizard alone. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I have to come clean quickly. I did fudge my rules a little bit for this one. This technically did not start off as a tweet, but instead a comment on a website. Specifically, it started off as a comment on comingsoon.net when the Muppets movie, the Jason Segel Muppets movie, was announced. But that comment no longer exists, and the most popular form of this sentence on the internet is in this tweet, so I'm counting it. And the main reason it's funny is because he calls Miss Piggy Pig Girl and Kermit a lizard. And also just the level of vitriol he has. He hates the Muppets. Okay, fine, I guess you're allowed to hate a piece of pop culture. But to say about a puppet that she's disgusting and I hate her with my life, you really only see this level of hate towards a fictional character when a person of color is in a Star Wars TV show. But much like Dave Grohl, I have another confession to make. I didn't really grow up with the Muppets. For reasons that are discussed in the interview, it kind of just passed me by based on my age. But I knew I wanted a Muppets expert. So I reached out to Patrick Cotnoir, who among other things produces the George Lucas talk show. And being a huge fan of that show, I know that he is one of the biggest Muppets fans on planet Earth. And so if I was going to get any expertise on the Muppets and on how true this tweet is, it would be from him. So Patrick, you're obviously a huge Muppets fan. I just saw the Kermit, figurine right on your desk.
Yes.
And this tweet is talking about a dynamic in the Muppets between Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog. Now, how would you describe that dynamic?
Oh man, I mean, are you asking me to describe it in 2024, or are you asking me to describe it in 1975?
If you could give possibly a comparison between the two, that'd be helpful.
Okay, in 1975, when they're starting up the Muppet Show, it feels very much like, she loves Kermit. Kermit doesn't necessarily reciprocate it, but he also there is something there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Obviously, these two are meant to be together, but he is not actively pursuing, being with Miss Piggy, who he's her boss, on that show. He's the boss of that show, and she is one of the stars. She thinks she's the star, but I would say she is one of the 3 or 4 big stars of that show. Now it feels fairly weird. It feels like they're, she's unrelenting. She's always following. If it was the opposite and she was a male pig and he was a female frog, we would all be like, oh, I don't know about that one. It's one of the things that Piggy has a few things that I think have not aged well necessarily with the Muppets. That is one of them where, it's obviously funny the way she is desperately in love with this frog and will do whatever she can to be with him. But also, if you watch that show, there's a lot of fat jokes about her. And it is something that is a little tricky to navigate while you're watching it. That has nothing to do with this tweet. That's just me throwing that out.
And so this tweet was from 2010. So would you say that in 2010, the argument of her not leaving that lizard alone would, obviously he's not a lizard, but would that hold water?
I think so. I think 2010 is a very different time. I also think 2010 is right before the quote unquote rebirth of the Muppets, because it's pre-Jason Segel movie. So I think this is at a weird time for the Muppets because they hadn't had a theatrical movie since 1999 was before that. So it's been 11 years since the last one, and they weren't really doing much. They hadn't been around that much. They'd done a few TV movies and would be on talk shows, but that was kind of it. So
that I think it makes sense when I talk about how the Muppets passed me by. I was born in 1996. So
see, exactly.
By the time the new Muppets movie came out, I was 15, and that wasn't exactly what I was looking to see.
Yeah, I get that. Which I think is one of the tough things with the Muppets in general, and it's one of the frustrating things about Disney owning them but not doing much with them. Mm-hmm. And you're you have this property. why don't you guys do an hour special a year or an hour special every 6 months? You know what I mean? Like, it's would not cost that much, and it's very frustrating that they kind of just let them sit on a shelf and languish while all of these generations are passing by, not having the cultural connection to the Muppets like you know?
Yeah.
Because I do think that they could become icons of that company, and they could use them in much smarter ways, even if it's just like in the parks or whatever. They don't use them a ton in the parks, and there's it's a shame that they're sort of just being pushed to the wayside for the Marvels and the Star Warses and all that other stuff.
Yeah. And as just a token of appreciation for you coming on, I'll give you 30 seconds to talk about Muppet Vision 3D getting shut down.
Thank you so much. It really fucking sucks. Muppet Vision 3D, it's one of the last things that Jim Henson ever did, if not the last, thing beyond like a talk show appearance, and it has run every single day since 1991, multiple times a day, probably 7 or 8 times a day. It's the last thing that this auteur made, and the fact that it is going away is kind of a slap in the face to the memory of him and those characters in general. You still have all of the original performers doing the characters in that show. Now there's only one original guy left at this point, so it's like you're destroying a piece of history. I truly hope. I've heard that there's a theater next to Rock and Roller Coaster in Disney World, and I would love it if they just moved it over to that theater, because I don't think anything is going on in there. But it's one of the funniest things to exist. It was written by Bill Prady, who created The Big Bang Theory and a whole bunch of other TV shows. He was a Muppet writer for a really long time. And it's a perfect, 16-minute film. And I would be truly furious if it went away forever. There's no real way to do it on, if they just uploaded it to Disney Plus, because there's live elements, there's audio animatronics, there's walk around characters that come in during that show. And it would be really hard to replicate that in an at-home setting, I think. I love it. It's one of my favorite movies, period. And it's such a shame that that courtyard that it is in, which was originally planned to be the Muppets courtyard and have multiple attractions, multiple different things, it has just become this like wasteland of Muppet 3D and Pizza Rizzo, which is a fine restaurant. It's okay. But like even the gift shop is closed, and you're just like, what are you guys doing? Like, you're leaving money on the table, I think, in general with those characters, by virtue of the fact that they're not doing anything with them. And it really sucks, and it makes me sad. And it makes me want to go to Disney World less.
I really want to thank Patrick for coming on, and if you're like, wait, he talked about Muppet Vision 3D for way longer than 30 seconds, the lesson there is, if you're ever talking to someone who is as knowledgeable and passionate about something as Patrick is with the Muppets, you let them talk as long as they want to. So how does this tweet get referenced? Obviously, it comes up anytime there's a Muppets meme, a Muppets photo. It can be applied to anything involving Kermit or Miss Piggy. Like it was used when the official Kermit the Frog Twitter account tweeted out photos of Kermit on a regular landline phone and a cell phone, but it also can just be used as a phrase in any sort of shitpost. Like this drawing, which I'm sure there's a name for what it is, but I'm not that versed in memes like this, where someone captions it, "When I'm watching the Muppets and the disgusting pig girl won't leave the lizard alone." The Globe Theatre in London asked, "What's your favorite Shakespeare quote of all time?" And Alex says, "I hate the Muppets because of the pig girl. I hate her with my life. She does not leave the lizard alone." When Caroline Nelson asked, "Are there any lines of poetry that you think about on a regular basis?" Johnny Lezebnik said, "I hate the Muppets because of the pig girl. She was disgusting. I hate her with my life. She does not leave the lizard alone." Undoubtedly, my favorite reference to it is this fake conversation between Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan. "I hate the Muppets because of the pig girl." "Yeah, Miss Piggy. She was disgusting." "Right. I hate her with my life. She does not leave the lizard alone." I apologize if that's a bad Jordan Peterson impression. Longtime viewers know I am bad at impressions. And also, I was looking him up to try to get better at it, but I'm like, wait, I don't want my YouTube feed to be all Jordan Peterson videos, so I stopped doing that. I really think that this tweet has staying power because the Muppets are one of the few cultural artifacts that is universally known. Despite them sort of being a blind spot for me, they're not a complete blind spot. I still get the references, I still get why this is funny. And so the idea of someone having a visceral hatred about the Muppets, but not knowing the Muppets well enough to know that her name is Miss Piggy and that Kermit is a frog is just very funny. And of course, this is how people talk about fictional characters all the time these days, so I guess he was ahead of his time. Please follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing. We get the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On February 14, 2022, Dina tweeted, "I grew up watching cartoons in French, and I remember trying to make friends in school asking everyone, 'Y'all watch Bob l'Eponge?' OMG, they bullied me so hard. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Sometimes I struggle to articulate why a tweet is funny, but this one's very simple. Bob Leponge is very, very funny. And I apologize for butchering all the French I'm going to use in this episode. I took Spanish in high school and I don't even really remember that. And more than just the fact that Bob Leponge is funny to say, it's really, really funny to imagine an excited kid asking her friends about what we're watching on TV, and she asks so sincerely, "Y'all watch Bob Leponge?" And the thing that makes it so sad is that it's just close enough that the other kids knew what she meant. Like, if it was a completely different translation, if it was not even close to being SpongeBob, the kids would probably be like, oh, that's probably just some cartoon I don't know. But even kids, I think, will be able to pick up on, wait, is that a name for SpongeBob? I really think it's the perfect proximity to SpongeBob to be really funny. So much so it almost sounds like a parody of what SpongeBob will be called in France. Like, you have SpongeBob over there, what do they call it? Bob Leponge? And I do love that unlike so many other translated titles, they don't try to, like, get the essence of SpongeBob and translate in French. No, they literally just translate the word sponge and put it after Bob. He's still called Bob. It's not like they made it like Jacques Leponge. They still call him Bob in France. And I feel really bad for Dina in this situation, because clearly she just wasn't thinking. I think if you stopped her at like 8 years old and said like, hey Dina, do you really think that they call it Bob Leponge in the United States too? She probably would be like, wait, no, that doesn't make any sense. But she probably was just so excited to talk about a cartoon she watched that she's like, yeah, it's called Bob Leponge. I'm not bilingual, so I can't attest to this, but I imagine that things can kind of get crossed up in your head where you don't think about one thing being in one language and another thing being in another language. It's Bob Leponge to her because that's what it's always been to her. I can't check her account because it no longer exists, but you have to assume that her story was something like she came over from a French-speaking country, or she had parents that spoke French in the home, so she already was at a disadvantage when it comes to not getting bullied, and she really ruined her chances with the Bob Leponge moment. And I really can't blame the bullies. That is great material for like an 8-year-old. You only need to know like 5 French words. You could just say, hey, did you watch Bonjour Arnold last night? And boom, she's been devastated. After this tweet, Bob Leponge became a common reference. It became used in place of SpongeBob in somewhat ironic contexts like this Hirsch photo. One of the more viral uses of the tweet is that someone photoshopped it to make it look like F1 driver Charles Leclerc actually tweeted it. I'm not involved enough in F1 to know why this is funny, but I had to share it because I think a lot of sources sourced this as the original tweet. And there's a series of memes where people took photos of stereotypical Americans and captioned them with basically in French, fans of Bob Leponge who call him SpongeBob. The joke being that his original name is Bob Leponge and Americans are the one who bastardized it. A funny thing that happened to me when I was looking up examples for this episode was that I just found tweets of people actually talking about SpongeBob, but from France. Like this tweet that says that this episode of SpongeBob left a mark on them. And I'm glad to know that that's true about us Americans and people across the pond in France. Because like if the Rock Bottom episode did not leave a mark on you in some way, I just don't think you watch SpongeBob. And I'm not even one of those kids cartoons or the real important television type people, but that episode did have a big impact. A great piece of additional information that Tumfofa or Temfofa provided is that not only is SpongeBob Bob Leponge, Patrick is Patrick Etoile, literally Patrick Star, but for some reason, Squidward is Carlo. There's no squid pun on Squidward's name in France. It's just Carlo. He's just a dude named Carlo. From a sociological perspective, I think why this has gained meme status is because it is funny and also kind of hard to grasp the foothold that American culture has across the world. Like us Americans, we don't really think about the fact that other countries are non-stop consuming our culture. But the fact that they have a SpongeBob that's not like a different version of the show, that is the same show but dubbed and with a different title, like that just demonstrates us how powerful our culture is. And that's a little uncomfortable, and I think that's undercut in comedy by the fact it's called Bob Leponge. I don't think any of this stuff is actively going on in the minds of people who share Bob Leponge memes, but I think it is kind of the catalyst of why it's a thing that we gawk at. Like, it would be funny if there's a guy in France who wore a bunch of football club hats who did videos called Du Musée de Twitter. Follow me for New Tweet every day because they're subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On February 27, 2021, Anar Herzog tweeted, "Rug carved into oak floor by Selva Aparicio. I'm in love." PCD Rom responded, "Okay, but what if my dog pissed on this? Then what?" Radlum replied, "I'd start with grabbing paper towels or something, I don't know. Good thing it's not the carpet, or that could have been a problem." And Jacob replied to that, Do you know how open, unsealed wood works? It would immediately soak in and stay there." And Radlum responded, "Oh yeah, would it? Big piss guy, huh? You know how piss reacts on any surface, you said?" This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Big piss guy, huh? Is one of the greatest phrases ever written in a Twitter argument. And this is really just a classic Twitter argument through and through. Up to and including the fact that the guy who has the last word is completely wrong. But we'll get to that. Now, I will eventually get to the references to this and the jokes people have made off of it, but I actually wanted to know what the truth of the matter was in regards to this type of flooring and how it would absorb urine and all that. And it just so happened that someone had reached out to me saying that she was an interior designer with an expertise in a lot of things like wood and architecture and all that. And she would be of service if I needed any help with anything. And I said, would you be willing to tell me the truth about the big piss guy tweet? And she gave me 2.5 pages of notes. So I'm going to quote from those notes. I'm going to paraphrase some of it. She gave me so much information that I would love to share all of, but I don't have the time. To start off, her qualifications is that she has a Bachelor's of Science in Interior Architecture with an emphasis on sustainability and accessible design research. The first thing to understand is that the wood in this photo is not intended to be walked on. It's not intended to be in someone's house. It is a piece of art called Childhood Memories by artist Selva Aparicio. It was her MFA thesis when at Yale, and as she puts it, is about her childhood trauma. It's a very serious and wonderful piece of art, according to people who know that sort of thing. My interior design source, who has to be identified as Molly, also provided a link to this article from My Modern Met, which is a great breakdown of it. I really recommend you read it. I'm not going to go through all of it because ultimately this exchange is not really about this piece. Now, what Molly told me is that the piece is made in utility oak flooring, also known as number 3, which the grades are given out based on appearance, not performance. And she notes that this type of flooring always comes unfinished. And unfinished is defined as, quote, being without treatment, meaning no varnishes or sealants, those protect the wood, and no stain, which does not condition the wood, only adds color. So the way she defines open, unsealed wood is open pore wood has to do with the grain. Open pore means you can see the pores in the wood, think depth. This is common in species like oak. Now, what Molly notes is that what the commenter is trying to say by calling it open and unsealed is that the parts that were etched are open and unsealed, but in actuality, the whole thing is open and unsealed. You just don't have the outer layer in the parts where it's etched. When I asked how it would affect cleaning out urine if the floor was unsealed, she said obviously it would be much more difficult. And she notes that, like I was saying, even if the dog peed on a part of the floor that was not etched, it still could do serious damage to it because the whole floor is unsealed. She does note, though, that the carved area would absorb more because it has more surface area. She says that paper towels would not be sufficient. It would remove urine on the surface, but it would leave the moisture in the floor. And she says that to fully clean it, you would need an enzymatic cleaner to neutralize the chemicals found in urine and other pet odors. A thing she does want to note, which I think is really important to emphasize, is that because of the nature of Twitter, because people are not really looking for context, this conversation is obviously had as if this is a rug, quote-unquote, that someone actually has in their house. Once again, that's not what this is. This is a piece of art. She does note that if you want to have something like it, but more practical, you could use a higher grade of oak, you could seal it. Now, it still would be more likely to get damaged and warped, but it would not have the same issues as having an unsealed floor. I'm going to quote this directly because I asked her if there's anything she wanted to add, and she gave me 2.5 pages of notes, so thank you so much. She says, this question has posed such an interesting introspection on two things I spend way too much time on: architecture and interior design, my profession, and niche internet lore, a byproduct of being chronically online for the majority of my life. This tweet interaction at hand is also something that is indicative of Twitter, the internet's town hall. People often assume the worst of others, especially online when a level of interpersonal interaction is eliminated. Now, at the end of the day, I love this tweet thread. I find it absolutely hysterical. The immediate knee-jerk reaction to go all mid-century playground bully and say, big piss guy, huh? In response to a relatively rational, plausible issue is hysterical comedic beat. It juxtaposes so well. The original tweet of, look at this piece of art, to immediately the internet trying to break it apart, disregarding the actual subject at hand and saying it doesn't make sense. Dare I say this tweet really sums up most arguments on Twitter, and why/how the Twitter main character is so often and easily dogpiled on. Jesus Christ, Molly, try to steal my job, why don't you? But seriously though, Molly, thank you so much. This is really, really helpful. Way more insightful than I could have ever possibly been. Okay, but on top of all that highfalutin woodworking interior design nonsense, I kid, the reason this is funny is because big piss guy, huh? Is funny. And because of, as Molly points out, how out of nowhere it is. Jacob is being a little bit condescending, but he's not really warranting that. And once again, he's completely right. Okay, not completely right, because as Molly pointed out, he doesn't really use the right terminology, but he is right that piss on this floor will be a lot more damaging than piss on a carpet. But instead of considering that, maybe considering that he made a mistake, Radlum is like, you know what, no. I'm gonna say that this guy's a weirdo who knows a lot about piss. He knows how piss reacts to all different surfaces. That'll show him. And objectively, that is a crappy thing to do. If you knew someone in real life who responded to any sort of pushback like that, you would not want to be their friend. But in terms of observing an internet argument, this is exactly what you want to see. So understandably, big piss guy, huh, is in a lot of people's brains. Like Micah Whaler, who says, for 3 years, the phrase big piss guy, huh, has been carved into my brain like the rug in that oak floor. When Gallup Freeman said, so I've started making a collection of urinals from various Half-Life mods. These are the ones I've archived so far. Ramona quote tweeted that thread with, big piss guy, huh? And I will say, I think this is a little more fair than the original conversation because this guy is literally cataloging urinals. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And a thing I appreciate, because I feel like a lot of of people who inadvertently started a famous argument thread would want to run away from it. But N.R. Herzog said when this went viral again, she quote tweeted a post about it saying, "You're welcome for big piss guy, heart, heart, heart." And you know what, she should take credit. If not for her post, we never would have gotten it. The real tragedy of the situation for Jacob is, once again, he was mostly right, but he found himself in a Hannibal Buress position. He was wondering, why are you booing me? I'm right. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On February 16, 2019, Andrew Sfarts tweeted, "Twitter is wild because the dumbest people are like, mayhaps you have slandered me with that ad hominem. And the smartest people are like, my dog is a chunky boy." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I think this tweet probably applies to all of the internet, but it really applies to Twitter. Because seriously, the dumbest people you will ever encounter are always using the longest, most technical words. And they're always talking about logical fallacies. Teaching dumb people about logical fallacies is one of the gravest mistakes society has ever made. And the reason why this phenomenon exists is because people who are actually smart know that the purpose of saying words is to communicate what you mean and to communicate your ideas. And people who are not smart think that the purpose of saying words is to try to look smart. That you will quote-unquote win an argument if you simply look smart enough. It's why they rely on things like calling out logical fallacies, because that's what you do in like a debate class. But a discussion on Twitter is not a debate. No one actually cares if you call out the name of a logical fallacy. Confusing jargon and talking in words like mayhaps just obscures the fact that you don't know what you're talking about. And the thing is, it's extremely obvious to anyone who is even a little bit smart. Like, the only people who are fooled by language like this are also dumb people. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of dumb people in the world, so lots of people have become successful off of talking like this, but like, you're not going to get that far in an actual argument. And the last part about what smart people are like, I think it's less thought out than the first part, but I think the point he's trying to make is that people on Twitter who are actually smart know that having complex arguments on Twitter is a waste of time. The smartest way to use Twitter is to post photos of your dog and say, my dog's a chunky boy. Especially if your dog is a chunky boy. If your dog's a chunky boy, I want to see said chunky boy. Like, I waste my time a lot, but I can think of few things that are bigger waste of time than getting in a serious discussion about anything on Twitter.com. I have tweeted many, many times, and you will see serious discussions with actual back and forths about serious topics very rarely. And this screenshot is used pretty often whenever someone is talking like this. I actually thought about doing it this week because there was that woman a few weeks ago who posted her PhD called Olfactory Ethics, the Politics of Smell in Modern and Contemporary Prose, and people were coming after her about it, and this guy Owen Keller said, her use of unnecessary synonyms in the subtitle bodes poorly for her intellect. Now, of course, in the context of fiction and prose, modern and contemporary do not mean the same thing, but this Owen guy's an idiot, so he thought that they did, and he had to talk about it in a highfalutin way. Bodes poorly for her intellect is certainly a way that a normal person would say makes her look stupid. Honestly, if you with a straight face in a tweet accuse someone of using an ad hominem attack, you're probably gonna get hit with a mayhaps you've slandered me with an ad hominem, ... And people outside of Twitter get tagged with this joke. Even the former coach of the Buffalo Sabres, Ralph Kruger, got tagged with it when he said, "Above all, my job here is to completely and totally and wholeheartedly focus on not accepting results that are bad and adjusting and changing." So behind the scenes, I have to say we are status quo in what we are demanding on principles and style of play. Like, listen to that and tell me that that guy is not trying to overcompensate for not being that smart. And Jenny Nicholson has a great corollary to this concept that I would have done a separate video on, but I think it's a little too similar. She says, you know that thing where you disagree with a guy online and suddenly his vocab switches from completely normal to writing missives from the Revolutionary War on a quill pen, as though that's going to give him some kind of intellectual high ground? In the replies, you'll find a lot of women knowing exactly what I'm talking about, and a lot of men going, I do not see why one should not be precise in his manner of expression. I merely desire to clarify my intent, lest my intentions be misjudged by hostile adversaries. The point here is the same, although she focuses, I think, a little more on the insecurity of the people who type like this than the lack of intelligence. But I think it comes from basically the same place, an insecurity about their lack of intelligence. Ultimately, I think it just reflects pretty poorly on people when, in a casual internet conversation, not like, a journal that's being published online, people talk or type in a way that they clearly don't talk in real life. And I know you're probably thinking, Jake, that's super rich coming from you. Have you ever heard yourself speak in the show? And the thing is, for better or worse, I talk in the show basically how I talk in real life. And if you're like, wow, that must make you very insufferable to be around, you're probably right. But yeah, there's basically no reason to change the way you speak online. And I'm always a little suspicious of when people do it, especially when they do it to try to sound smarter. Once again, if you need to rely on jargon, fancy words, and debate club tactics in order to make a point, you probably don't actually have a point. Either that or you're trying to avoid making your point because your point is like super racist or something. I mean, let's be honest, it's the internet, that's a lot of what's going on. Now, I do find it interesting that Richard Morrison actually brought this tweet up, relating it to a passage from a book called Facing Social Class, How Societal Rank Influences Interaction. And the quote that's highlighted is, linguistic capital refers to syntax, vocabulary, vocabulary, fluidity of expression, and signs of comfort or discomfort, for example, hesitations, use of humor, and public interactions. Bourdieu notes that members of the lower middle classes portray their sense of cultural dispossession by using stilted, overly formal language at public events. Now, this is not a one-to-one comparison because this is talking about class as opposed to intelligence, but I do think it is related. Like, I think the reason why I feel comfortable with the hesitations and saying like and now and a bunch of other filler words is because I know that I'm pretty good at speaking otherwise. If I was a nervous public speaker, and obviously I'm not, you can probably just tell that about everything about me. I was born without the nervous about public speaking gene. It is what it is. If I was a nervous public speaker, though, I probably would be less comfortable doing things that might betray an informality or a lack of intelligence. The reason why smart people are willing to say my dog is a chunky boy and misspell chunky and boy is because they're not worried about people perceiving them as stupid, because they know that they actually are smart. I know I'm getting dangerously close to patting myself on the back and saying, I talk informally because I'm actually smart, but there is some truth to that idea that you're willing to talk more informally if you're more secure in your intelligence, in your status. And so the dumbest people on Twitter would not feel it necessary to say mayhaps and slandered and ad hominem if they actually felt any security in their intelligence. If they weren't constantly afraid that the person they were talking to was smarter than them. And I feel a little bit bad for them, but I'm also like, come on, you're an adult. This is a little pathetic. Just make the case yes or no. Is the dog a chunky boy? Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover everything that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On December 22nd, 2016, Tiger Woods tweeted, Xmas tradition that my kids love. Mac Daddy Santa is back. -TW. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Sports Tweet Friday, not Saturday, because there's a specific tweet I have to do on the 21st, so the sports tweet of the week is coming on Friday this week. And I had to get it done before Christmas, because what says Christmas more than Mac Daddy Santa? Tiger Woods, as I'm sure you all know, is one of the greatest golfers ever to live. He's certainly the greatest golfer of my lifetime. And I know people like to poo-poo the athleticness of golf, but his dominance of golf in the early 2000s is almost unheard of in any sport. Like, sports talk shows used to go into majors asking, who do you take, Tiger or the field? And that wasn't a crazy question. Obviously, things kind of got screwed up for him in the late 2000s. He got a lot of injuries, and also he famously cheated on his wife a bunch and got exposed for that. And so his reputation is very mixed these days. And I bring all that up because I think that all makes the existence of Mac Daddy Santa weirder. Both because it's weird to see one of the most dominant athletes of a sport, be Mac Daddy Santa, but it's also weird for someone who famously cheated as much as Tiger Woods did to call himself Mac Daddy anything. To be clear, I'm glad that this exists. I think that it is more funny than it is weird. I mean, it is more weird than it is funny, but I find it more funny than I find it weird. So let's talk about what Mac Daddy Santa actually is. Tiger Woods poses with his shirt off, which is already a little weird, and then he has his goatee bleached, and he's wearing a white Santa wig of some kind. And on top of that, he's wearing a regular hat. The thing that makes this Santa, I guess, is just the white beard and the white hair, which fine, that I guess is Santa enough. And the thing that a lot of people question about this is the fact that he says that his kids love it. And I understand why that seems weird. It is him with his shirt off, and it does have the words Mac Daddy in it. But honestly, this feels like exactly the type of dumb bit that kids would love. Like, yes, it is a little weird that he came up with the bit to begin with, but I could definitely see kids being like, be Mac Daddy Santa, be Mac Daddy Santa, because they don't know what any of that means. And also, he's their dad. Dads do weird bits. I don't know, this never really rubbed me the wrong way, but I needed to mention it because it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And if you're wondering, has Tiger Woods ever addressed this, I don't know, in an interview with the official PGA Tour YouTube account the next year? Let's see.
Every year I've become this character, Mac Daddy Santa. Kids absolutely love it. They love when I do something crazy, and last year I burned my face off trying to dye my goatee, which is never going to happen again.
It is fun to know that he actually dyed his goatee for this photo, but I guess in future Mac Daddy Santa appearances, he wears a fake beard. Speaking of future Mac Daddy Santa appearances, if you're thinking, wait, did he ever reprise the role of Mac Daddy Santa for a tailor-made commercial for Christmas one year? He did. That's just a short snippet because a lot of it is just other famous golfers who I'm sure anyone who doesn't watch golf does not recognize. I promise you, every other person in this commercial is a famous golfer, just being elves. Mac Daddy Santa's only in it for like 5 seconds. Also, he's not really Mac Daddy Santa at all. He's just dressed up as Santa with sunglasses. I guess TaylorMade didn't want to scandalize audiences by putting a shirtless Tiger Woods in their ad. Frankly, this is Mac Daddy Santa's stolen valor. What was the response to Mac Daddy Santa when Tiger Woods first posted it? Not great. News account Phil Lewis responded asking why. Fellow golfer Rory McIlroy quote tweeted it and said, "Wake me up when it's 2017." And it still gets brought up to this day. When a long Tiger Woods HBO documentary was coming out, Jeff McDevitt tweeted, "This better be addressed in HBO doc." Family Man Bro said that this photo is what it's like when he's 3 sidecars deep on Xmas Eve. I included this tweet because one of the drunkest times I've ever been was off of sidecars, so I can relate. In 2023 on Christmas Day, Treb Law remarked, "To this day, I still cannot believe A, his kids like this, and B, he would actually do this." And when he won the Masters in 2019. One of the greatest achievements in sports history. I really cannot emphasize, if you're not a golf fan, how miraculous it was that he won a major championship after not winning one for like a decade, after having like 17 knee surgeries, after being basically done, like not competitive for a while. He was only competitive like a couple times in the few years before. The fact that he won the fucking Masters. I can't emphasize how crazy that was. But even then, after he won the Masters, Zach Osmond tweeted, "This guy just won the Masters, Mac Daddy Santa is back." But the best reference to it, and this is mostly my opinion, because anyone who knows me knows that one of the things I'm most obsessed with in the world is the fact that one of the women that Tiger Woods had an affair with was just a random waitress at his local Perkins. And for those who are not in America or not in an area that Perkins exists, Perkins is like IHOP if it tried to be classier but the food was worse. And so Used Golf Facts tweeted the Mac Daddy Santa photo with the caption, "Perkins waitresses kids be like, I saw mommy kissing Mac Daddy Santa Claus." But seriously, for you youngins, if you haven't ever read into the story of Tiger Woods' affairs, it's crazy how brazen he was. He would just roll up to the Perkins, which was like 10 minutes away from his house, in an Escalade, and pick up this woman. Everyone at the Perkins knew that she was dating Tiger Woods, you know, her family... completely nuts. And this is just a woman at a Perkins. I think Mac Daddy Santa is a really interesting piece of Tiger Woods' lore, because part of his lore is that before the whole cheating scandal, he basically never said anything interesting in public. He had a super squeaky clean image. He was really, really boring. He was like a machine about golf, which makes sense because his dad basically taught him to play golf from when he was like 1.5. Now, is one of my hotter takes that sort of parenting is never warranted even if your kid does grow up to be one of the best golfers of all time? It is, but I'm not going to go into that. But because that people got the idea that he had no personality at all outside of the golf course. When the truth was, his personality was just kind of like gross. Like after the whole cheating scandal came out, people talked about him being at clubs and him basically sleeping with any woman that moved. And so like, yeah, it makes sense when you think about it that Tiger Woods' warped sense of humor would be like, yep, Mac Daddy Santa. That's not to say that there's anything salacious about this, but like he's just a weirdo clearly. As I think anyone who's been taught to play sports since they're 1 year old would be a weirdo. So in that way, I'm glad that Tiger Woods found Mac Daddy Santa. I'm glad that his kids like it, even though it's kind of weird. I think it's great that he has a relationship with his kids that they can joke around about Mac Daddy Santa. Because personally, if my mother chased my dad in a car with a golf club because she found out that my dad was cheating, and that was big national news, I might have a complicated relationship with my father. And that's not to say that Tiger Woods' kids don't have a complicated relationship with him, but at least it is not complicated enough that they can still enjoy Mac Daddy Santa. And in that way, I'm like Tiger's kids, because at the end of the day, I enjoy Mac Daddy Santa. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big in the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On December 5th, 2020, DeSevnin tweeted, "Rod, do you mind taking this?"
As Black people, genetically we are stronger and smarter than everyone else. We are more creative. On December 21st, our real DNA will be unlocked and majority will be able to do things that we thought were fiction. Learn who you are as a people. Walking emoji. They want to make us average.
This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. There's only one tweet I could do for December 21st, and so I'm doing it. Now, obviously, it's mostly out of my purview of things I can talk about, so like I did last time this came up, I put together a panel of my good friends AC, Anthony Canton III, and Rod Morrow of the Black Guy Who Tips podcast. The basic context you need to understand going into this conversation is that this tweet was a combination of pandemic conspiracies and like astrology stuff with Jupiter and Venus lining up in a certain way, and Black Twitter as a whole took this tweet as an opportunity to joke about getting superpowers on December 21st. I'll start with you, AC. Do you remember when you first saw this rumor that Black people were going to get superpowers on December 21st, 2020?
So I did, and initially I had the same thought that I always have when I heard Kyrie Irving speak back at during that time. And it was just like, all right, I'm going to ignore this. But then as the hours kept going on, and then Black Twitter got on it, and you started seeing more jokes and more jokes flying, there was a point that I said, like, yo, you know what? As a kid, you always wanted to think about having superpowers and what that would mean and just flying around the world. So I at that point, I was all in. So everything I kept seeing in terms of people, whether they were making jokes or they were doing the alterations with the glowing eyes, and talk about like, yo, my power's coming in, and my power's coming in. I'm feeling a little different today. That was just, it was such a wonderful time. It's just a reminder of when Twitter is a wonderful place, especially when Black Twitter gets involved.
Now, Rod, do you remember when you first heard about this?
Yeah, saw it on Twitter, and immediately saw the person that took it serious. So my first reaction was like, let me look at some old tweets of this person, and they were of conspiracy theorists about the coronavirus being a virus that was designed to attack the black people, but somehow got modified to attack everyone. And so I knew at that point not to take it serious and was immediately on joke time.
Now, Rod, I actually went on your Twitter and I looked up every tweet you tweeted between December 5th, when this was tweeted, and December 21st.
Yes.
And you actually only had one tweet that was referencing it. And I'm going to send it to you right now. Do you mind telling the audience when you get it what you tweeted?
I retweeted. So someone tweeted out Charlemagne as Professor X and Joe Budden as Magneto on December 19th. And I quote, and they said, "What the fuck are y'all drawing?" And I quote tweeted it and said 12/21/20, meaning this is when they will get their powers, and it will be unlocked.
So, AC, I know you brought a couple tweets from this time. What are the joke tweets that you remember?
Well, this one from @TravelGXD. They really created an organization for December 21st called the National Institute for Genetic Gifts and Astronomic Superpowers, aka NIGGAS. I need my superpower pronto now. Oh my god! And then you got the dude at Mud Millionaire. When the roach bit you at 12 with the Travis Scott brown Batman photo. Those are like the two that stood out to me the most, that made me laugh.
The ones that I found that I can share are the one where it's Stevie Wonder to his wife on December 21st, and it's the clip from the Real Housewives reunion. It's like, I see you. Bria Celeste tweets, "When I turn into an air fryer around December 21st. Or the meme where it's like the girl explaining something to the other girl who's like under the covers, and it's me. Black people didn't always have superpowers. My kids."
Right.
Mark Phillips, "If I get a trash superpower on the 21st, I'm gonna be hot." I'm not gonna ask you to play junior sociologist, because that's usually what I do on the show. But like, Rod or AC, is there anything? What do you think the phenomenon is that lets Black Twitter immediately go into cascading joke mode in a time like this?
Gallows humor, man. I feel like we've always had to have it in America. You know, it's how it's part of how we survive, how we thrive. And I think moments like that, it's like a release of a pressure valve, because a lot of social media is very, it's very hard on people. It's someone got shot. This emergency. Be stressed about the economy, politics. So when you get that pressure valve release, which comes around every so often, like this, which is just an excellent joke premise, it just becomes like a comedy writer's room where everyone's punching up different jokes, and those are my favorite moments on Twitter.
I mean, the shit turns into Dragon Ball Z, basically. Like, you get into a situation where Goku needs that spirit bomb, so Black people basically provide. Everybody's single, like, cascading jokes one upon another joke upon another joke, and we get that spirit bomb, which ends up being some of the more funnier moments that we ever have gotten online, which... Honestly, in a world full of toxicity, especially on the internet, you could use a few moments with great jokes like that.
It was a lot of fun to see, especially because like the specificity of it is what made it funny to me. Is that it was the 21st? Like, why? I mean, it was kind of being a thing with like the planets aligning or whatever.
Right.
And I did just find another great one. Jesus Nice tweets, "Wow, just saw the Black People Superpowers update is over 100 gigs. Just a heads up if you have a data cap."
Yeah, shout out to Jesus.
I think also the thing that made it special for me, and Rod or AC, you can comment on this, is like, I think it is exponentially more funny to me that the first person who said it was serious. If it started off as a joke, it would be less funny.
Yes,
yeah,
agreed.
I think that's such an important part of this, because if somebody's saying it as a joke, then maybe you'll get like one or two things after that. But because you could tell that they were so specific and so focused on this aspect of things, it's like they really believed it. It made it easier for everybody to jump in.
All right, any final thoughts on the topic, guys?
I still haven't got my superpowers. And
AC, what superpower would you have hoped you gotten on the 21st?
I think invulnerability, because with these bad knees and bad back, #wash agenda, we're out here struggling right now. So I go with definitely invulnerability.
Rod?
I think I'd like the Force. Just a good old, just some telekinesis. I'm a throwback.
And I'm getting news that the official Comic Book Writers Association of America says no to both those and is giving you electricity powers. Anyway, back to you guys. I want to thank Rod and Anthony for coming on to discuss this with me. I don't have much more to add, except to say that I think it's just something magical about Black Twitter, that just this one random person's tweet about a conspiracy theory about, you know, the stars and planets aligning got so many people to make the same joke. Like, it's one thing if a huge news event causes a bunch of people to make jokes about something, but it's a completely other thing when just a random tweet gets them all to make the same joke. And while other spheres of Twitter do it, no sphere of Twitter does it nearly as well as Black Twitter. This is not a novel observation, but Black Twitter is really the heart of English-speaking Twitter. And I would actually argue that part of the reason Twitter is still hanging out at all is because Black Twitter has not migrated somewhere else. Like, until a run of jokes like this is possible on Blue Sky, I will always keep a Twitter account. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On April 15, 2018, Donald Trump tweeted, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Subscriber Sunday, where my subscribers get to suggest and then vote on which tweet I cover. And for this one, they chose a classic Trump tweet. And I think it's an important Trump tweet because it reflects a very big part of his personality. The fact that, and I don't even say this with that much judgment, because I think it's actually a very human thing, that he basically will say a nice thing about anyone who says a nice thing about him. For context, this is in 2018 when Kanye was first starting to flirt with the MAGA movement. It was a 41 on SNL and wore the MAGA hat, but he still was pretty clearly going down that pipeline at this point. And the tweet that Donald Trump is quoting, which has now been deleted, is Kanye saying, "You don't have to agree with Trump, but the mob can't make me not love him. We are both dragon energy. He is my brother. I love everyone. I don't agree with everything anyone does. That's what makes us individuals, and we have the right to independent thought." That's why it was so funny that Trump's response was, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool." Almost like a parent who was just handed a mediocre drawing by his 6-year-old son. "Oh, thank you, Kanye, very cool. I can't wait to hang that right on the refrigerator where everyone can see it." I know I'm just stealing the Family Guy bit about Ringo Starr writing a song, but whatever. The thing I'm fascinated with about this exchange is, did Donald Trump really even read what Kanye said? Does Donald Trump really know anything about Kanye? Has he ever listened to his music? And I'm not saying this because I think Donald Trump's out of touch, although I do think he's out of touch, but because, like I was saying, the only thing that Trump really cares about in this situation is that Kanye was saying nice things about him. That's why I always find it so funny whenever liberals point out, like, "I can't believe Trump is embracing this guy. He said bad things about him," or "he believes in this thing that Trump doesn't believe in." It's like, if you say nice things about Trump, he will ignore literally everything. And this is not even a political take. This is just a take about the man's personality. Like, I'm positive the way that this came about is that some aide said, "Hey, Kanye West is tweeting nice things about you." And Trump grabbed his BlackBerry, saw the tweet, quoted it, and said, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool." Now, a tweet I'm positive that Trump read, because it's short enough and is mostly visual, is when Kanye later that day tweeted out that his MAGA hat was signed, and Trump responded with, "MAGA." I'm not going to chronicle Kanye's descent into MAGAdom, because smarter people than me have, but I will say, it's not that surprising in hindsight. The man has, like, the biggest ego of anyone in the entire world. Not really that surprised that he ended up hitching his wagon to a guy who also has a gigantic ego. I think people do this thing with celebrities where they hear them say one good thing or have a couple good ideas or maybe do a good piece of charity work and think like, "Oh, this celebrity must have a strongly held and coherent worldview that is aligned with mine." And that's just not true. And I know we're not supposed to say crazy anymore, but, like, come on, let's not be stupid. Kanye West definitely has been out there for the past decade, and it's not that surprising that he went for a candidate that all the other out there people went for. Now, the "Thank you, Kanye, very cool" tweet has lived a very long life. It's often cited in those prompt tweets that say, like, "Hey, what's a tweet that has changed the way you speak?" And it's also just a phrase that can be used as a caption for anything, like Mo here uses it as a caption for a thirst trap. I'm not really sure how it makes sense, but it makes sense. Fine, put whatever you want in a thirst trap. And it's been used both sincerely and ironically whenever Kanye does something. Like when he said something that conservative commentator Michael Knowles agreed with, he said, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool." When there's an allegation that Kanye got Daily Loud's Instagram account suspended, Lord Treesap said, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool." And when a boy got a DoorDash order from a guy named Ye, he said, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool." And I know Kanye's been on some hard times, but I'm pretty sure that that is not Kanye. It also became a great format to post in. A very basic one is that someone edited a McDonald's tweet to say, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool," when Kanye said, "McDonald's is my favorite restaurant." Multiple people used the photo of Kanye holding up a legal pad to say, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool," with some type of Photoshop. This one, for example, has a drawing of Doodle Bob. Another edit someone made is a drawing of Kanye and Trump holding hands as stick figures, to which Trump says, "Thank you, Kanye, very cool." This does kind of go back to what I was saying earlier about a drawing that goes on a fridge. And Seinfeld Current Day edited this whole exchange to replace Kanye's tweet with him saying, "I'm working on an X-rated B movie sequel where we see Barry B. Benson and Vanessa have sex in graphic detail." But some would argue that the most important use of this tweet is in the lyrics of the 1975 song "Love It If We Made It." In the context of the song, it sounds like this. "Thank you, Kanye, very cool." Now, some hosts of this show would lie to you and say, yeah, I knew this forever. I'm a huge 1975 fan. Honestly, I didn't know that they did this until someone on my Discord pointed it out. And I didn't even know anything about the 1975 really, except that, Taylor Swift was dating the guy from it. Sorry. And so I felt like I was going to have to speculate about what they meant by this, but thank God I don't. Because Maddie Healy actually gave an explanation to why this line is in the song on Genius.com. And so I'll just read that verbatim instead of trying to make up why they did it. They write, I think the Kanye thing was this dichotomy of all his social projects in Chicago and his altruistic attitude towards helping community, and then the bizarre affiliations that he was making in his political life, or whatever he was starting, celebrating Trump. And it's a combination of the whole, and I think, thank you Kanye, very cool, taken from the other perspective, sardonically however, how I presented it. Being on the wrong side of history is never normally celebrated retrospectively. The Kanye thing really confuses me and upsets me a little bit as such a massive Kanye fan, and I have been for years. I almost didn't want to dig him out. It's just a fucking weird time, isn't it? I'll be honest with you, that explanation didn't really help me understand it more, but I'm glad I read it aloud. Because if it makes sense to you, I'm happy for you. To be clear, I get what he means when he's talking about Kanye, I just don't know what it means in terms of why it's in the song. As we go into another Trump term, what I do hope is that we don't make a big deal about events like this as much. And I don't mean in terms of it being a meme. I think turning this into a meme is fine. But in hindsight, way too much time was spent thinking about Trump befriending celebrities who just were nice to him. Because like I was saying earlier, it has nothing to do with the celebrity themselves. I think if almost any formerly liberal celebrity were to tweet a nice thing about Trump, either him or one of his very close allies would quote tweet it saying thank you or something to the effect of thank you Kanye, very cool. Because while there are consequences, it is undeniably funny that the most powerful man in the world is so easily manipulated by flattery. Like, part of me believes that he would add Hillary Clinton to his cabinet if she said nice things about him on Fox News a few days in a row. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and if you want to vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays, please become a subscriber. Also, you get the Museum of Not Twitter, a weekly series where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that now started on Twitter. On November 30th, 2017, Lil Chop Cheese tweeted, my classmate was damn near in tears, ranting about how much Kurt Cobain means to him, and how he wants to include that in his documentary. And I was like, damn, drinking my cup really changed lives. But he was talking about Kurt Cobain. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Look, the mistake here is pretty simple. Someone confused the name of Kurt Cobain, a Houston rapper, and Kurt Cobain, the frontman of Nirvana, from whom Kurt Cobain derives his name. And they're obviously extremely easy names to get confused. I've gotten them confused like 5 times since I started recording this. So the funny thing isn't that it's weird to get them confused. It's funny to imagine watching someone basically in tears about Kurt Cobain, a musical artist that means a lot to a lot of people, and you can understand someone being maybe in tears about it. I mean, I wouldn't be, but I understand it, I guess. But the listener is like, wait, is he really talking about Kurt Cobain, that one-hit wonder rapper from Houston from 2011? And the thing that makes this tweet special is the fact that Lil Chop Cheese's response is not to make fun of this person, it's to think, damn, drank in my cup really changed lives. She was just fully going with it. Like, yeah, this kid's nearly in tears over Kurt Cobain. It's good for him. Drank in my cup changed his life. And I'll come clean, I'm not really an expert on this topic. I didn't recognize Drank in My Cup by name, although when I listened to the chorus, girl, I know how much you really want somebody that don't really need you, I remembered it from around that time, so I called in an expert and friend of the show. Cameron Hawkins is a wrestling journalist currently working for Yahoo.com, and he also grew up in Texas and knows a lot about Texas music at the time. In fact, when I looked up Kurt Cobain and hit the People You're Following tab, he was the person I followed who tweeted about Kurt Cobain the most. So Cam, can you do me a favor and just put Kurt Cobain as an artist into context?
For sure. So we're talking early 2010s. There was this influx of kind of second generation Houston artists. When I say second generation, like, after you have, UGK, Ghetto Boys, the original Freestyle Kings, Swisher House. It's kind of this next generation of guys. And we're kind of talking like, Paul Wall and Chameleonaire, Mike Jones, Slim Thug. And that thing really starts to kind of take off like towards the end of high school, I guess, for me. And, being from Texas, I grew up on like their mixtapes. So not like their mainstream stuff. Like, Still Tippin' was more like a celebration. It's more like an arrival after stuff I had heard all through high school. But Kurt Cobain is from this generation, like that's like right after that. That's still doing like the super Texas lingo, but with more of an R&B feel. So like, it's the thing that Drake kind of popularized, for lack of a better way of saying it. That he, and he'll say it himself, but he got a lot of his style and swagger from Houston. So Kurt Cobain, on the flip side, is kind of like that authentic artist from Houston who came up and came down on on like that kind of lingo, that kind of music, and then kind of flipped it over to, like I said, the more like melodic style.
And as someone from Texas who you said, you know, you were growing up with these mixtapes and things like that, how do you feel about Kurt Cobain's reputation as a one-hit wonder? I mean, even his Wikipedia page describes him as such, and that feels a little far.
It's really interesting. I actually came across a press release a couple of months ago, and I pitched it to Complex, and they didn't bite. But it was about him coming back out and making music. I think what happened to him, right song, wrong time. It's really hard to recreate that perfect sound of a song. Like, it is just so thoroughly Houston, like with the lyrics, with the samples in the background, with the slowdown. It just really is, and it's hard to do twice. Like I said, so much of the very best songs from that time, from Texas, from Houston, are from artists who didn't do it again, or those things were really, really popular on a mixtape and never made it out. So in some ways, he's more successful than a lot of Houston artists that people don't know about having that one hit. It's just so hard to do twice when you're in a very specific cultural lane. And it's still kind of the same sound, but a different sound, like I said, from the Mike Joneses and the Paul Walls and the Chameleonaires.
And last question, relating back to the tweet, do you think it would be possible for Drink and Mike Cup to change lives?
Listen, man, I was a young man once. That song did a lot for me as a young man, as a young, early 20s post-college grad. I don't know if it can change lives. It'll improve your night, and it'll make you question your morning. That much is true.
I want to thank Cam for coming on the program again for providing great context. As for the Kurt Cobain part, which I'm a little more comfortable talking about the context of, he was, of course, the frontman of Nirvana, like I said, and he died tragically a few years into their success. And because of his tragic death, he is a very important figure in music. He is revered, talked about a lot, and he's exactly the type of person that a teenager would be near tears talking about how important the music is. And so once again, it's incredibly funny to imagine someone talking in those reverential tones, those near tears tones, about Houston rapper Kurt Cobain. However, Lil Chop Cheese is not the only person to get these two people confused in a funny way. Gloombug tweeted, I remember in middle school, this one girl was obsessed with Kurt Cobain, and someone told her Kurt Cobain's dead, and she cried because she thought it was the other one. Rianne typed out a conversation between her and her sister. Isn't Kurt Cobain dead? LOL, no. Yes, he is. Kurt Cobain is dead. Oh, I thought you said Kurt Cobain's. When explaining why he gets them confused, Tone Stradamus pointed out that they're both really misunderstood artists with short but impactful careers. I feel like I've been a little dismissive of Kurt Cobain's this episode, so I want to share an anecdote I found on Reddit when I looked up this tweet. Catnip37 recalled the story of delivering him and some of his friends a $20 pizza, and he tipped him over $100 and took some photos with him. Farrell's Barkley asked to see those photos, but Catnip says they're on an old T-Mobile sidekick. And that's the type of thing that you just can't imagine Kurt Cobain doing, because he died before the invention of the camera phone. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that's big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On March 2nd, 2019, Trey Wingo posted a photo of a steak with the caption, "Oh, yes." And Spencer Hall quote tweeted and responded, "Steak cooked inside a truck muffler," adding, "Ordered the earth and turf. Made it Pompeii style. Steak so sooty it's singing Chim Chim Cheree. Steak looks like Don Draper's lungs. Smokey the Bear just off camera with his head in his hands. Whole dish needs lotion. Hellboy's first night running Expo in the kitchen. Loretta Lynn's dad plated this up. Shireen Baratheon-ass steak." And he returned months later on July 5th, 2019 to add, "When William T. Sherman's running the grill. If you or a loved one was exposed to this steak, you may be eligible for financial compensation. I'll take the Uncle Owen. Steak looks like a diorama of hell's 34th least popular resort island. Grandpa Steak Joe ain't making it to California with the rest of the family. Beef Cinderloin. Steak burned so thoroughly it just committed to play corner at Texas Tech. Steak hit the plate so hard it killed the dinosaurs and left a crater in the Yucatan. Okay, I'm done reheating this steak. It's done enough already." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's almost Christmas, and like every other holiday, this Christmas will include a lot of plate roasting. Plate roasting is when someone posts a photo of what they're eating to Twitter or another social media site, and people make fun of it because it looks bad. And so I felt it was only appropriate to feature what is, in my opinion, undoubtedly the all-timer in plate roasting threads. Spencer Hall absolutely eviscerated Trey Wingo's plate. It is a tour de force performance. I have to imagine that his eyes rolled back into his head like Stephen McKinley Henderson's character in Dune, and he just pulled all of these incredible lines from some godly ether above us. A little context is that Trey Wingo is a sportscaster who used to work for ESPN. This photo was actually taken at a steakhouse somewhere in Indianapolis. I could speculate which one it was, but I don't want to insult it in its food because I can't be sure. And Spencer Hall is a college football writer who, among other things, hosts the Shutdown Fullcast, which is the best college football podcast podcast in America. And before I break down each of these insults one by one, which is why I'm here, I also want to note that Spencer was not the only person who thought this looked bad. In fact, a chef even did this rant about how horrible it was that this was even sent out to someone. Okay, but let's get down to it. Steak cooked inside a truck muffler. This one's pretty self-explanatory. What would it look like if a steak was getting all of the fumes and gases that come out of the back of a truck muffler? Order the earth and turf. Also pretty self-explanatory. What if instead of a surf and turf of fish and a steak, you got earth and turf, which is, dirt and a steak? Made it Pompeii style. This is implying that it looks like it was cooked in a volcano, referencing the fact that the city of Pompeii was destroyed in the year 79 CE by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Steak so sooty it's singing chim chim cheree. This is implying that the steak is so sooty, as in the residue that chimneys have, that it is literally singing the song that Dick Van Dyke sings in Mary Poppins when he's playing a chimney sweep. Steak looks like Don Draper's lungs. This is a reference to Don Draper, the main character of Mad Men, who smokes a lot. Ergo, his lungs are extremely black. Smokey the Bear just off camera with his head in his hands. This is referencing Smokey the Bear, the character designed to prevent forest fires, basically implying that the steak is the result of a wild forest fire. Whole dish needs lotion. This is an easy one. The dish looks ashy. It could use some lotion. Hellboy's first night running expo in the kitchen. Hellboy is a comic book character who became a film character who, one, likes to smoke cigars, and also he is like a demon, so he's related to fire. And an expo is the person who is the liaison between the kitchen and the waitstaff. Basically implying that somewhere between Hellboy getting the dish from the kitchen and getting it to a waiter, he set it on fire more in some way. Loretta Lynn's dad plated this up. Loretta Lynn was a country star from around the 60s to around the 80s, and notably, one of her biggest songs was called Coal Miner's Daughter, her autobiography was called Coal Miner's Daughter, and her biopic was called Coal Miner's Daughter. So the joke here is that Loretta Lynn's dad, who was a coal miner, was the one who plated this up, which is why it looks like it came out of a coal mine. Shireen Baratheon ass steak. Shireen Baratheon is a Game of Thrones character who notably in season 6, spoilers, is sacrificed by being set on fire in order to help her dad Stannis win the throne of Westeros. Of course, this doesn't work, so she's just kind of set on fire for no good reason. In this way, Spencer Hall is comparing what has happened to the steak to what happened to poor Shireen Baratheon. This is my favorite of all of the tweets. When William T. Sherman's running the grill, this is a reference to how General William T. Sherman, during the Civil War, marched across the South and ended his campaign by burning the city of Atlanta to the ground. This steak is like Atlanta. If you or a loved one was exposed to this steak, you may be eligible for financial compensation. This is referencing and using the same words as those late night commercials about asbestos and things like that, basically saying that this steak is as dangerous to be around as asbestos. I'll take the Uncle Owen. Uncle Owen is, of course, Luke Skywalker's uncle who raised him, and him, along with Aunt Beru, were burned alive when Luke was away. In this way, if you were to ask for an Uncle Owen at a restaurant, you would get a steak as charred as his body. Steak looks like a diorama of Hell's 34th least popular resort island. He's saying that this looks like it's so burned that it must be in the fiery pits of hell, but it doesn't even look that good. It's actually only the 34th least popular resort island. Like, this is not even a good resort island in hell. Grandpa Steak Joe ain't making it to California with the rest of the family. This is referencing Grandpa Joe, the character from The Grapes of Wrath, who dies before they make it to California and gets buried. This is what the steak is like. Either I don't fully get it, or this one is more tenuous than the others, but I still enjoy it. Beef Cinderloin instead of beef tenderloin because it's been lit on fire. Steak burnt so thoroughly it just committed to play corner at Texas Tech. This is a specific college football reference. It's that to get burned, if you're a cornerback, is to get run past by a wide receiver, and Texas Tech is historically very bad at defending generally, but also very bad at defending the pass. So therefore, if you were to commit to play corner at Texas Tech, you get burnt a lot because you're bad at being a cornerback. Steak hit the plate so hard it killed the dinosaurs and left a crater in the Yucatan. Spencer's comparing the steak to the flaming meteor that killed all the dinosaurs. Just wonderful work. And he ends it by saying, okay, I'm done reheating the steak, it's done enough already. Basically saying he's done flaming it, he's done reheating it, quote unquote, because it's already done enough because it's overdone. Trey, for his part, had the absolute lamest response one can have to being made fun of. He said, I mean, it's blackened on the outside and medium on the inside. Also, if I valued your opinion, I'd follow you, but since I don't, I didn't hate that so much. If I wanted to follow you, I would. Yeah, he's making fun of you. You're not the target audience of it. Yeah, is it the nicest thing in the world? No. But he's not tweeting all of these things because he's trying to get you to eat better steaks. He's tweeting them because he's making fun of you and trying to be entertaining. And I think friend of the show and Twitter legend Dragonfly Jones sums it up best when he said it a few Thanksgivings ago. Today is a day where everyone is going to be a comedian on here and going in on plates that are posted. But there never will be a plate that was roasted as thoroughly as this. This was a masterclass. Because it was so relentless. Because he came back months later because he thought of more jokes. And the thing that's so extraordinary about it is that these type of jokes might come out if someone posts a plate and a bunch of different people are responding. But all of these jokes came from the same man. He was just determined to get off as many jokes about a steak being overcooked as he possibly could. And this episode is not to discourage you from posting your plates on Christmas. If you have a good looking plate, please post it. But know that if you don't, you might incur the wrath of the Spencer Halls of the world. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover everything that was big on the internet that not started on Twitter, and also you can vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On December 25th, 2014, my tweets Real AF tweeted, I'm real enough to meet, and beat your ass. How's Temecula sound? And Snotty Drippin' responded, fuck it. Let's go, loser. Temecula. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Merry Christmas, everyone, and I felt it was important for me to talk about, on today's episode, the most important thing that's ever happened on December 25th. And no, I do not mean the birth of Jesus Christ, I mean the Meet Me in Temecula argument. I feel like Meet Me in Temecula is a foundational text to understanding Twitter, especially Twitter before, 2016, 2017. Because I cannot emphasize enough that what happens here is that a man, on Christmas Day, left his home and drove 35 miles to try to get into a fistfight with someone he was having an argument with on Twitter about Kobe Bryant. This is not someone who insulted his mother. The man was defending the honor of Kobe Bean Bryant. And he left whatever Christmas festivities he was at. He said to his mom, "Mom, this ham is delicious, but I have to go beat someone up over Kobe Bryant." And he got on the highway, probably a crowded highway because it's Christmas Day, and was going to beat someone up over Kobe Bryant. This story has really become a shorthand for any time someone wants to get in a physical altercation over an argument on the internet. I don't have specific details on this, but apparently some Brazilian K-pop stans were arguing on Blue Sky, and one of them gave a shopping mall to meet at so they can get in a fight, and someone called that Meet Me in Temecula K-pop remix. And that was recently. Meet Me in Temecula has so much staying power. Now, the original Meet Me in Temecula argument is actually kind of hard to piece together if you don't know what Twitter was like back in the day, because for one, My Tweets Really AF deleted all of his tweets the day of, and there are no screenshots of them, so that doesn't help. And back in the day, you couldn't quote tweet people as a separate tweet. You had to actually include their whole tweet in your tweet, so it looks really confusing if you don't know what you're looking at. Also, it's pretty specific basketball stuff, and some of the stuff that's being referenced was never screenshotted. So basically, I'm going to narrate it as opposed to going tweet by tweet. And I will be very much aided by the fact that Snotty Drippin', real name James, did an interview with SB Nation the next day where he gave his side of the story and he fills in some of the gaps. It all started when My Tweets Really AF tweeted that Russell Westbrook was the best shooting guard in the NBA, and Snotty Drippin' quoted and said that was pretty stupid. Snotty then went on to his timeline and also found a tweet where he said that the Spurs would be better without Tim Duncan, and he said that this was also stupid. Now, the tweets we're missing from My Tweets Really AF is that he apparently responded by saying he was being sarcastic, saying that Duncan wasn't good, trying to make fun of people who said that the Lakers would be better without Kobe. And without getting into the basketball nitty-gritty, Snotty Drippin' responded to this by basically saying, Duncan is actually better for the Spurs, and Kobe isn't. Kobe's much worse than Duncan is right now. And this incensed My Tweets Real AF. I think a lot of their annoyance has been washed away since Kobe passed away, and people don't want to be mean about Kobe fans. But before Kobe passed away, I will say personally, there is not a single group of fans of any sport who I disliked more than Kobe fans. If you had asked me what type of fan would be willing to get into his car on Christmas Day and try to beat someone up, I would say absolutely positively a Kobe stan would. Apparently, My Tweets Really AF started calling him some slurs, calling him names, and said that he was real and he should ask about him. And Snotty, joking around, asked his followers to retweet a tweet if they thought that My Tweets Really AF was not real. And this absolutely incensed My Tweets Really AF, especially after Snotty Drippin' called him a loser. So he said, "Loser? I bet I don't lose the fight. LMAO, you in San Diego, right?" Because at the time, Snotty Drippin's bio said that he was living in San Diego. And that's where we get the fateful threat. My Tweets Really AF says, "How's Temecula sound?" Because Temecula is about equidistant from Los Angeles, where he lived, to San Diego, where Snotty Drippin lived. To be clear, it's not really close out of those places, especially with Southern California traffic. Like, if you were in Los Angeles, you would never say, "I'm just gonna pop by to Temecula and get right back." And playing along, Snotty Drippin responded, "F it, let's go, loser, Temecula." But he was never actually gonna meet him there, because as he said in a later tweet, he was at his mom's house in Arizona eating roast pork. Because, of course, it was Christmas. A lot of people, particularly younger people, are not at home on Christmas. And even if people are home on Christmas, why would you ever assume someone would be willing to leave their Christmas festivities to fight you over Kobe Bryant? And you might be like, oh, this is all talk from My Tweets Real AF. Of course he said that he went to Temecula, but no one can prove it because Snotty Drippin' didn't go to Temecula. No, we can prove he went to Temecula. Because upon learning that Snotty Drippin' was not going to meet him in Temecula, he was already in Temecula. So he took a photo of himself, flipping off the sign, welcoming you to Temecula. The man drove at least an hour and a half, probably 2 hours round trip, just to get a photo with a sign and be mad that he was not able to fight someone over Kobe Bryant. This was an incredible thing to witness in real time. All of basketball and sports Twitter was there thinking, there's no way that this guy is really getting into his car on Christmas Day and going to Temecula. This is clearly an idle threat. No person, no reasonable person, would ever get into their car on Christmas Day to fight someone over Kobe Bryant. And the mistake we're making there is the word reasonable, because reasonableness is not something that a Kobe stan generally possesses. And so yeah, that is, as far as I can tell, the last that we ever heard of My Tweets Real AF. I'm sure he made another account, I'm sure he made other arguments on basketball Twitter, but he never identified himself as the guy who drove to Temecula. And I really don't blame him. I would never admit to that if I was the guy who did that. A thing I find funny is that this story is often told as My Tweets Real AF saying "meet me in Temecula," but that's not actually a thing he says. It's kind of like a Luke, I am your father thing, where people remember a line being said that isn't actually said. The only time the words "meet me in Temecula" were written were when Snotty Drippin' script and said that that's what he told him. But, like I said, it became a shorthand of threatening people online, usually in a joking manner. Like when someone tweeted at Steve Nash, "You washed up, you frail," he responded, "I'm the hardest 41-year-old you know, Brody. Watch your mouth or Temecula." When Mark Lamont Hill said that mac and cheese was overrated, Michael told him to meet me in Temecula. And because I can't resist making fun of the Chicago Bears, earlier this season, Dag told Shane Waldron, their former offensive coordinator, to meet him in Temecula. And yeah, people are still trying to get in real-life fights over online sports arguments. Oleg Boltman pointed out earlier this year that on a Florida State Seminoles message board, someone gave their actual address to try to get into a fight. Keeping in mind, this is a Florida State Seminoles message board. All of the people on this message board ostensibly root for the same team. And he's like, "Nope, pull up. I'm in Cottondale, Florida." I will say, college football message boards are the most unhinged places on the internet, and if you think that sports fans on Twitter can be angry and weird, you don't know anything. And the funny thing I found looking through tweets of people quoting "Meet Me in Temecula" is that Temecula is a very beautiful city. I didn't realize this, but it's like a huge wine city. There's beautiful resorts, and people love going there. Like, look at these photos of this person drinking some wine on a vineyard in Temecula. I kind of feel bad that for a lot of the population, a very beautiful city with beautiful wineries and beautiful buildings and like 100,000 people is mostly known for internet fights. Well, that and my sister Lisa from Temecula, who, need you to cook her meat. I do want to sincerely wish everyone who's watching this a happy holiday. I really hope you're having a great time with your friends or family or whoever you want to spend time with. I think it's very easy to take for granted the time we get with those we love, but it is finite. So please enjoy it. Please enjoy the company. Please enjoy the food, the drink. I know you don't want to hear this from the Twitter guy, but it's important for me to say it. And don't worry, I'll be back to my usual outro on Boxing Day. On October 19, 2013, Chooch tweeted, "Hi, Grandma. Can you come pick me up for my rap battle? It's over. No, I lost. He saw you drop me off and did a pretty devastating rhyme about it." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Here we have another weird Twitter classic, imagining a scenario that is just very funny. And I think it's one of those things that gets funnier the more you think about it. Like, there's something sweet and funny about the fact that this grandma clearly is aware that her grandson is in rap battles and is supportive enough to want to know whether or not he won or lost. And you can also imagine the guy that Chooch is going up against in this rap battle seeing like through a window like a beige Toyota Camry from 1992, a woman with white hair dropping Chooch off and taking out a little notebook being like, "What rhymes with grandma or grandmother? Grammy?" And I'm not really well versed in rap battles, and I thought about getting well versed in rap battles, but honestly, I don't really enjoy watching them. The only rap battle clip I watch with any frequency is the, Doodle Bob clip. The one about to Doodle Bob, me hoing yoin yoin yoin, erase this square, that guy. Also, that's a good line, and everyone saying it's not doesn't know what they're talking about. He's calling him a square and he's gonna erase him. It's a good line. But if I had to imagine a line that the guy would say about Chooch when he saw his grandma dropping him off, it would be something like, "I'm the best, I'm like no other, and I drove myself here, not my grandmother. Because I got a car, I'm an adult with a license. This guy Chooch, here his life ends." I don't know. That was a freestyle, so I'm not that embarrassed about it, but that's what I got for you. And I know I've talked about the weird Twitter era a lot, and I know that maybe I'm overrepresenting it in all of Twitter, but to me, it's just an essential era to understanding Twitter, and it's an essential era to understanding the Twitter that I love. Like Seal here puts it perfectly. These kind of posts were absolutely this website's peak. Just a rando saying some incredibly funny shit. Remember the good times. And like a lot of good weird Twitter jokes, it's not referenced that often. Most of the quote tweets are just people saying, "This was a great tweet. Remember when Twitter was like this? I love this tweet. Top 10 tweet of all time." But it sometimes does get referenced and sometimes it gets put in the mouth of characters. Someone put it in the mouth of this character Elon Ceres, who is a Gundam character. The Gundam wiki says his character is from Mobile Suit Gundam The Witch for Mercury. I have no idea whether this is accurate or whether it is funny, so if you're a big Gundam head, please let me know. I always try to represent groups that I don't know anything about because I'm not the only person who's on Twitter. A situation multiple people have used this Chooch tweet to describe is Elon Musk's mom going on Twitter or on television to defend him. I don't fully agree that it makes sense with the Chooch tweet because I always interpreted the grandmother dropping the grandson off as just a nice thing and not actually being a thing worthy of ridicule. But I do understand where they're coming from here. And the reference to it that made me want to do it soon is Zach Sconfield tweeted after Drake came out with his lawsuits against Kendrick Lamar and UMG. He tweeted, "Hi Grandma, can you pick me up for my rap battle? It's over. No, I lost, and I've decided to initiate legal action against Universal Music Group, UMG, and Spotify." Honestly, I think that getting dropped off to a rap battle by your grandmother is 10 times less embarrassing than suing your own label because you lost a rap battle. The Chooch character in this tweet would absolutely eviscerate Drake in a rap battle because he has so much more ammunition. "Oh, I got dropped off by my grandma? You went to your lawyers because someone made fun of you too much." And I don't know, maybe I'm just a sentimental type, and maybe Chooch has a much more cynical view of this, but I like to imagine that when this character got back in the car with his grandma grandma told him to keep his chin up and said, hey, maybe I'll drop you off down a few blocks so they don't see me. And then Chooch would say, you sure? And she would smile and say, yeah, I'm sure. Once again, I'm definitely reading into this too sentimentally, but I am and have been called a schmaltzy cornball. That's whose TikTok series you're watching. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was bigger on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On December 11, 2023, Drew Janda tweeted, the haters said I couldn't do it. And they were correct. Honestly, great call from the haters. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It honestly astounds me that this tweet is only about a year old, because it feels like it's been in the Twitter lexicon forever. It's so useful to both make fun of yourself and to make fun of other people, because I feel like we do very much live in an age of self-deprecation, especially on Twitter. Many people have joked that Instagram is the site to show people how great your life is, and Twitter is the site you go on and say, oh my god, I'm miserable, my life's terrible, I'm terrible, etc., etc. And here, Drew is aping a sort of post that a lot of people make where they decry their haters. Oftentimes, people who tweet things like this or post things like this on other sites don't actually have haters at all. Like, we all know that one guy we went to high school with who posts on Facebook about the hater said he couldn't do it, and the it is like getting a middle management job at a Jiffy Lube. Not that there's anything wrong with having a middle management job at a Jiffy Lube, but like, I'm sure that there were no haters saying you couldn't do that. But the humor in Drew's tweet comes from imagining that someone would both be the type of person to tweet about their haters, but also would have an honest enough assessment of themselves to be able to admit that the haters might be right. Which is why, while it's funny to say about oneself, it's extremely funny to imagine other people saying. Like, one of the earliest quote tweets of it was Seva saying that Gorbachev said this in August of 1991. Another early quote tweet was Scott Chegg putting a little text bubble coming out of the Ocean Gate submarine. I feel like this one is particularly appropriate because there were actually lots and lots of haters, read other scientists, who said that they couldn't do it, and they were right. And it's really a great way to make fun of someone, particularly a political figure, when they don't succeed. Many people, including Benji Sarlin, use a screenshot of this tweet when RFK Jr. dropped out of the presidential race because the haters really said he couldn't do it, and they were right. Just recently, this person whose name I can't show on TikTok used a screenshot to describe President Yu's coup failing in South Korea, and many people, including Magister Johannes here, used it to describe Matt Gaetz pulling out of contention for the Attorney General role. Like lots of memes, it's often put in the mouth of fictional characters like Jared Gilman here, who puts it in the mouth of Bo from Bo is Afraid. I actually don't know if there's ever been a character in film history whose haters were proven more correct than Bo from Bo is Afraid. And as you can imagine, even if you're not a sports fan, this is really a perfect meme to use in sports situations. Like when Daniel Jones was cut as the quarterback for the New York Giants, someone put this up saying, statement from Daniel Jones, the haters said I couldn't do it, and they were correct. Honestly, great call from the haters. When the Braves were eliminated from playoff contention this year, Scott Coleman tweeted, the haters said the Braves couldn't do it, and they were correct. Honestly, great call from the haters. And something that hits close to home for me as a University of Florida football fan is Dan Thompson tweets, the haters said Napier couldn't do it, and they were correct. Honestly, great call from the haters. Now that does remain to be seen. Can Napier do it? I don't know. He's sticking around. I don't know how I feel about that. The most out-of-the-box example I found of this tweet being referenced was Alli tweeting, the haters said my fox is trash, and they were correct. Honestly, great call from the haters. He is a member of the Super Smash Bros. Melee community, and I guess he is bad at maining Fox on Super Smash Bros. I don't know who this LA guy is. I don't know how special this tweet is, but it is nice to note that this tweet made it to the Super Smash Bros. Community. At the risk of doing too much pop sociology, I feel like this tweet really came at a perfect time. Because I think if this was tweeted in like 2012, the world was still too optimistic and still too cheery about everything. And if it came a little bit later, I think the world would be too cynical. Because this tweet is neither optimistic nor is it cynical. It's kind of just resigned, like, yup, the haters are right, I can't do it. Now, as someone who sees a therapist once a week, I can tell you that that is not a good outlook to have towards life. But it can be very funny to say it yourself in certain situations, and it can definitely be very funny to imagine other people saying it. Because it is an incredibly relatable feeling to think, wow, I can't actually do this. It sucks, but I can't do it. And reframing that as in a statement about one's haters is very funny and makes a situation that might be crappy funnier. Like if I lost my job tomorrow, I would be very bummed, but it would be a little funnier if I said to myself, the haters said I couldn't keep a job, and they were correct. Honestly, great call from the haters. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing with the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote for what I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On December 31st, 2013, Carmelo Anthony tweeted, at Kingsley5, I didn't ask for your glazed donut face ass to root for me anyway. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's the last sports tweet Saturday of the year, so I thought I'd do something New Year's themed. So what is the context of this? Why would 10-time NBA All-Star and future Hall of Famer Carmelo Anthony call a person who's not famous a glazed donut face ass? It all started when Carmelo Anthony sent out a Happy New Year's Eve tweet along with a link to get a giveaway of his new pair of sneakers. At _ Kingsley5 did not take kindly to this. He responded, how about you win a ring? You fucking kill me, man, rooting for you all the fucking time, and you always disappoint me. And that is to what Melo responded with, I didn't ask for your glazed donut face ass to root for me anyway. And given that context, I think Melo's response is completely appropriate. Like, Melo was just trying to give away some sneakers and celebrate the new year, and this guy's like, I hate you, you kill me, why don't you ever win a championship? And I say this as a Knicks fan. Yeah, do I wish that Carmelo brought us a championship? Of course I do, but like, He's just trying to give away some shoes, man. Also, he's a human being. Don't talk to him like that. This is Melo we're talking about, who put up 62 in the Garden against the Bobcats. Now, to some, the phrase glazed donut face ass might be confusing. But here, ass doesn't mean butt so much as it means, like, self. You almost could say glazed donut face self. Basically, the main thing that Melo wants to get across is that this guy's face looks like a glazed donut. His account is not still active, so I can't see a current profile picture, but zooming in close on this, yeah, I can see it being glazed donut-esque. A year after this tweet, SB Nation's Seth Rosenthal had a great write-up about it where he explored other possibilities. He asked, what if Melo was suggesting his attacker has a glazed donut's face on his ass? Or what if this guy has an ass on his face of the glazed donut variety? This is obviously not what he meant, but it's fun to imagine. Just a few weeks ago, Hassan Minhaj brought up this Twitter exchange when he was a guest on Carmelo and the Kid Mero's podcast, 7 p.m. in Brooklyn, but unfortunately, Melo really didn't give any commentary on it, he kinda just laughed. But the Kid Mero pointed out that even back in 2014, he was saying hashtag never forget about it. This exchange is often joked about and is especially used as a feather in the cap of Carmelo Anthony's career. Like Trolato said, it makes him the greatest Olympian of all time unquestionably. Ethan Smith wrote the following poem. Roses are red, Maryland loves Old Bay. I didn't ask for your glazed donut face ass to root for me anyway. And MBB Owens made this artistic rendering of the tweet. And this exchange is important not just because it's funny. Twitter legend, friend of the show, and person who knows what they're talking about with these sorts of things, Dragonfly Jones had this to say about it. Can't overstate how big a moment this was. This was 2013. Celebs weren't getting in the trenches on Twitter like that back then. Melo and Rihanna were the lone Spartans on Twitter, taking on the masses back then. Melo ran so KD could fly. Because that's the thing, this was still early on enough in social media where you really never knew if a celebrity was ever going to respond to you if you said something crazy. Don't get me wrong, people now still say stuff crazy to celebrities, but a lot of it is because they want them to respond. But I'm sure that Kingsley thought he was just shouting into the ether that no one was going to read his tweet. Or if Melo did, Melo would turn the other cheek because he's such a rich and important person. And so it was important for Melo to say, no, absolutely not. If you talk to me like this, I'm going to call you a glazed donut face ass. And honestly, I feel like we've strayed too far from this. Yeah, you don't want your star players to be mixing it up with every single person who says something even vaguely mean about them. But folks on sports Twitter are just way too comfortable talking crazy about people. And you know damn well if this happened today, there'd be like a whole controversy of like, is Melo being a bad example by using language like this on Twitter? And it's like, no, he'd be a bad example if he let someone talk to him this way. So this, among other reasons, especially when he went to that bodega with a monogram bathrobe on, is why Melo is the god to me. I'm sure a lot of you have New Year's resolutions for 2025, and I'm not going to add anything super big to it, but I do implore you for the year 2025, stay mellow. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing. We get the Weekly Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter, and also you can vote when I cover on Subscriber Sundays.